to the January 8th, 2019 school committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. First, we'd like to open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Department for over 37 years.
If I could add through the chair, yeah. John Harbour was a neighbor of mine, and I think many, many people who went through the high school knew him. Many people in town knew him. He was everyone always says this, but he really was the sweetest guy. And after he retired, after 37 years, he volunteered at sporting events, and I think just so many people in the community knew him, and he will be a big loss to our community. I want to send our condolences to the family and to everyone who knew John and whose life he touched.
Moment of silence, please. Thank you, and thank you to John for all his service. First on the agenda, we have approval of the December 11th, 2018 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
So it passes 4-0-1. Next on the agenda is approval for a warrant. Is there a motion?
I'll make a
So-
motion to approve the warrant, or I'll second it. One of those.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
Passes 3-0-2. Thank you. Public participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda? Okay.
Madam Chair, just two brief announcements at the beginning of the meeting, just so before it gets too late. Just want to remind everyone, January 16th, so that's a week from tomorrow, is the Kindergarten Information Night, and that's between 7 and 9 p.m. at Burlington High School Auditorium. And those are any families who are going to be registering a kindergarten student for next fall. Again, it's not mandated, but it's a great way to get information, especially if you're new to the district, about the curriculum, some of the details. Donna Sullivan from the Before and After School program will be there. The principals will be there. So I think this is going to be, I'm looking at Josh, it's our fourth. I think so, yeah. So, and we've gotten good feedback about the information that we share. So I think encourage that. Also, concurrent to this meeting, in three communities, Malden, Fitchburg, and New Bedford, they're having project equity presentations, and that's where there's, I think, over 40 communities are speaking about the foundation budget review recommendations made by the Senate. I think in all of the inaugural comments that were made by Senator Spilka, by Speaker DeLeo, and by Governor Baker, all three mentioned fixing the educational funding formula as a priority for this legislative session. So I'm not sure they'll agree on the details, but I think it was a big step to have all three parties agree that the school funding formula needs to be addressed after 25 years. And so the Superintendent's Association is starting that conversation tonight, again, at those three communities, and just wanted to recognize that, thank my colleagues. They're putting in a tremendous amount of time, and those conversations, again, are happening in Malden, in Fitchburg, and New Bedford. And the MASS website, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, is a great clearinghouse for detailed information on the Chapter 70, which is basically the state money that we get for public education across the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Our student representative, welcome.
Hi. So during our school student council meeting, we discussed on having an office marathon day, which will be January 25th after our midterms. The time will be 10:30 to 2 o'clock. There's also going to be a costume contest, so whoever has like the best costume will win a prize, and there's also going to be a pretzel bar. The class of 2022 has organized the Dave and Buster's night, which will be January 28th, and their Blaze Pizza fundraiser will be February 14th. There's also a new program called Distance Learning, which Mr. Adebato will speak to you guys about. It's basically a program organized so our school year will start on a certain day and will end on a certain day, so there won't be any snow days. But Mr. Adebato can come and talk to you about that as well. And that's all.
Yes.
I think that's at the,
Better do a good job now.
at a subsequent meeting,
Yes.
but,
Yep.
Thank you.
Great, thank
have you approved the presentation?
Yes.
You have.
I agree with him on his proposal.
All right, and you're comfortable with him representing this idea?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and it's not just me, there's a whole.
There's a whole.
No, Joe, I'm just trying to add some pressure, that's all. She has high expectations. You'll be here for that presentation,
Yep.
correct? Okay.
Nice, great. I'm sorry, I might have missed it. Was there a night for, a day already picked for Dave and Buster's?
Yep, it's gonna be January 28th,
Great,
and the Blaze Pizza fundraiser is gonna be February 14th.
okay. Oh, Valentine's Day, nice,
Yep.
okay. Good luck with those.
And
Simon?
could you clarify also, I heard there was something on January 25th, but I didn't catch what it was.
There's an office marathon day.
Office marathon?
Yep.
Can you
there's a
explain what
TV
that is?
There's a TV show called The Office, which is very popular amongst the students
Okay.
and many of the faculty. So we're gonna have a marathon day. So we're just gonna watch like a few of the episodes, as well as like eat some food.
Okay, I get it. And what day of the week is that?
That's gonna be the Friday.
After exams are
After
done?
midterms.
Perfect, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. Are there any subcommittee reports to share tonight? All right, seeing none, Ways and Means, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you'll be out soon. Next on the agenda, we have some wonderful students from the middle school here tonight, and Ms. Purchase,
Thank you, Madam
Saw.
Chair. We have, under instruction technology, we have a sort of some middle school guests. So I'm certainly going to invite up Carrie Purchase, principal, and I think you're here with Josh. I see Josh Murphy in the back. I'm going to give you the choice. So do you want to do robotics first, and you'll defer to that? So with that, I think we have the robotics coaches. I see Jordan Marino, Jane Lynch, and John Walsh. You guys want to come up and introduce your team? And we're very excited to have you here, so thank you all very much.
Thank you for having us.
Happy New Year, by the way.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah, so we have just a fraction of our actual team from the Marshall Simons Middle School. Shortly after school started in the school year, we started a robotics team practice. And so we had 50 participants come out and join, and we divided them up into 6 sub-teams, which competed for the qualifying meet in Upton, Massachusetts, for the first LEGO League competition. This year's theme was Into Orbit, so everything was oriented around space, and used that subject as a way for these kids to work on a project, design a bot, which they'll explain to you in a few moments,
Solve a problem.
and solve a problem.
A real-life
Yeah.
application problem.
Yeah, so they have a presentation which they can give you a bridged version if you're interested, and they can get into some more information about that. And of the 6 teams, 1 team successfully qualified for the state tournament, which was in Newton North just a few weeks ago. And that team's name is the Space Potatoes. So if it's okay with you, I'd like the Space Potatoes to come up and explain kind of what they did to qualify for the state tournament. And if you have any questions, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to answer them. as well with any other team members from the other 5 teams who are here to support the Space Potatoes.
We're very excited to hear from them, so
Okay.
that'd be great.
Thank you.
Come on, Space Potatoes.
So we are the Space Potatoes. As Mr. Marino had said, we qualified for the state competition, which was at Newton North High School a few weeks ago.
Space Potatoes, can I take a time out and ask you just to tell us who you are?
Yes.
Besides the Space Potatoes.
I'm Max.
I'm Daniel.
Joseph.
John. I'm Will.
I'm Brendan.
I'm Thomas, and Elijah and Elijah and Cooper are not here. They could not make it. They were obviously, but so our
They were buried.
yeah. So our main project was obviously about space, but we wanted to go more in depth, which most teams did. So we focused on space farming and different ways that we could use different ideas to create a more efficient way to grow food in space. So we came up with the idea of using centrifugal force to create an artificial gravity source and then grow plants inside of that, and I think you guys have more. Anyone?
So our idea used centrifugal force, as Tommy stated, along with automatic pickers, water tubes, and moisture sensors in order to completely automate the process of growing food, so that it wouldn't take any time out of an astronaut's daily routine.
And one of our main aims for this project was to lower the cost of food in space, because currently NASA spends about $1,800 per day for food for astronauts in space.
So we spent a lot of time working on our project. I made this model here, which isn't exactly in-depth, but it shows how we would use solar panels to then charge up a motor, which is actually under this, to then use a large ring to spin and be able to grow food inside of it. We spent a lot of time on it. I think we did pretty well. Does anyone have an award? Yeah, we won
Lightning round.
Lightning Round Award and
Gracious professionalism.
Gracious Professionalism Award at the state level.
Can you tell,
Let's talk a little bit about gracious professionalism and why it's so important.
So gracious professionalism, I think, would mainly just be being able to work with other people and being kind to other ideas and not just having a one-minded view that your idea is obviously the best, even though you hope it is, but it's being able to accept other ideas and be able to work with other people on it.
yeah, that's probably one of the most important lessons there is. So how did the competition work?
So this competition is split up into 3 parts. Your score. So 33% of it is your robot. The other 33% is core values, and then the last 33% is the project.
I mostly worked with the project. So we had 9 people, so a lot of people that we would have to help and be able to do stuff. So we kind of split up based on our abilities, sort of to divide and conquer. Cooper was more or less the leader, kind of, for coding. And I believe Daniel and Elijah, who's not here, were a few of the main people, but Max also contributed to the coding, and a few of us also helped. And everyone contributed with the project, obviously, but it was mainly, I believe, me, John, Joey, Will, and Brendan who worked project-wise on most of the bulk of the ideas and work.
And did the robot have a role in the space farming?
Well, no. What they did in the competition is that they'd have the robotics part, which is they give you a board with different Lego tasks that you'd have your bot go out and do through coding it before and after. And the project was sort of just a different section of it, but the entire idea was basically about space. So the robot would perform different space tasks, like, do you have the rover?
No.
So there was, one of the things was a sort of rover where you'd have to have the robot toss a Lego piece and be able to roll over something. And one of them was you'd have to have the robot hit something to launch a sort of rocket into space. All kind of space concepts, but the robot and the project were 2 different things.
Can you talk about how you're mentoring the younger team that's coming up?
Yes, that was Cooper's idea.
Okay. Someone's and thank you.
The elementary
Chloe.
schools all have their own robotics team now, and like
the decisions for us to help by volunteering at each elementary school, usually the one that you went to before going to middle school. So we will go there and kind of mentor them and maybe show them what it's like when they get to middle school and become robotics members, and to help them out for their robotics competition.
It's a great idea. So what elementary schools do you all come from?
Pine Glen.
Pine Glen.
Max and I come from Fox Hill.
All right, so we got a full mix there. That's great.
And the 2 people that are not here are from Pine Glen.
So that's good, from all over town. Did you participate in the robotics at the elementary school when you were there?
They actually didn't have it at the
No, it wasn't part of the thing.
What was this summer camp? One time there was one time like a robotics camp that you could do, but no competition.
Because I believe the robotics club started when we were in 6th grade.
Yes.
And we, on our team, plus the other 2 people who were not here, were one of the first people to sign up. And it grew exponentially over the 3 years from 20 people to 30 and now 50 in just the middle school, and then expanding to all of the elementary schools and summer programs.
So you think it's a part of the curriculum that we need to pay attention to, that's pretty popular, that's expanding, so the committee should keep their eye on it and make sure it's continues to get supported?
Oh, yes, definitely. I would, if I had the opportunity in elementary school to do this, I would have definitely done it.
We have another member here that's gonna speak a little bit to that. His name is Neil.
So,
Neil, step up to the mic.
over the summer, we had a summer camp, as Thomas said, and we had to mentor. So while I was there, I learned a lot about how they think and how they learn to create new things. And it was actually pretty impressive because they came up with pretty creative ideas on how to solve the same tasks that we had, but in a new, different kind of way. And we didn't do much. They did most of the work. We're just there to guide them most of the time.
Spoken like a true teacher. So was that the camp at Memorial?
Yes.
Yes. So that was Mr. Musselman, and I think Ms. Shepard was there. Is that correct? If I'm remembering correctly, yes. Awesome.
Miss Anderson.
Yeah. So
Mrs. Lynch.
you were there too, right? Yeah. It's awesome. That was very popular. Couple weeks.
I'm gonna just add on a few things for that. So Mr. Musselman, who isn't here to join us tonight, has worked diligently to build this program. As these kids said, they are freshmen. They came in 6th grade with no robotic experience. Probably all played with Legos and had, strong math science background. And we took 21 kids first year. And we made it to the States our first year. Last year, we got an alternate spot at the States. Yeah, but we weren't called up, and this year, back to the States again. So in our 3 years of having a team, we just keep growing. And the popularity of it is immense. We were overwhelmed with the response of kids that wanted to come, and we had to really make some hard decisions. So we're losing 23 veteran kids this year. And they have been mentoring the younger kids, the newer kids. Brendan came in as an 8th grader this year. So and believe it or not, we do have a lot of girls on the robotics team that just don't happen to be here tonight. So we're so proud of these kids. They've worked so hard and deserve all the accolades that they received. 2 trophies, and we have medals to present to them tonight.
If we could give the state team, qualifying team, their medals, and then have the team come up for a quick picture.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, the whole
All right,
team.
so
Yep.
take that off.
do that, we might have some other comments and questions.
yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
certainly.
Yep.
Jordan,
Yep.
you take over.
Yes.
Congratulations, Neil, thank you so much.
The other students on the robotic team, feel free to come up, share your
Mikey, come
name
on
with
up.
us.
Hi, I'm Henry.
Nice job.
Is there anything else anyone would like to add?
I would like to mention that in fifth or 4th grade, I forget exactly which year, a teacher at Francis Wyman, Mrs. Lynch, decided to do
do a robotics club, which wasn't really an FOL team, but it was just basically an introduction to robotics that people at Francis Wyman did go. A lot of people from Francis Wyman that continued on to the middle school went to.
Nice. Ms. Monaco?
Henry, I was going to ask you to say something because I know your dad is on our Ways and Means Subcommittee. And so I thought it would be nice to hear from you on robotics. And now I'm going to embarrass somebody because right next to you is my grandson, Mike. And Mike, I would like you to tell the committee just a little bit about what you've told me about robotics, what you think about it, what you think about the future, whether it pertains to all the kids.
Alrighty. So I've had an interest in robotics for a long time, most of the time I've been in Burlington schools, and I think it's a very good program to kind of let kids experience STEM and like building and constructing robots and programming them. And also to, a very large part of it is developing teamwork. And that's ever important in today's society.
What about going forward in high school? You going to continue it?
Yes, I would say so. Obviously, I haven't been to the high school yet, but I would predict that a lot of the mechanics and functions of the high school DevilBots would be similar to that of our middle school team. So it does provide a good experience for that as well.
Think the coaches are doing a good job?
I've been told to say yes.
Come on, Mike, tell the truth.
Yes, they were incredible coaches. I really don't think anyone could have done it any better.
Nice.
Well said. Nice. Anybody else want to say anything? Mikey was kind of told in advance to be ready, but anybody want to talk about your experience anymore?
I believe we have another Ways and Means child, do we?
Do we?
Is there anyone else? No? I may have.
At practice, they're much louder than that.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Nelson.
I just want to congratulate you. I was going to ask about the potato machine. Does it work?
Does it cook them?
We hopefully, well, we haven't made one that's actually that, because it'd be very big.
I thought
expensive.
Mr. Marino might have some kind of a virtual machine that you could grow a potato in, but.
The research and development is on its way.
R&D, okay, all right. I remember several years ago when the committee approved a stipend for a robotics team at the high school level, and we all hoped that it would grow and expand and work its way down to the middle school, and to hear that it's working its way down to the elementary schools as well, and that you're mentoring, the elementary students, I think that's phenomenal. And I just want to congratulate all of you, the coaches, and those who aren't here, and all of you who are here tonight. You spoke very well, particularly for middle school students. I think you're going to do great when you come to the high school level and beyond, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
As the coaches, so as a team, this is our third successful season registered. So, we have seniors who are in the 8th grade who've been on the team for 3 years. So we're all watching on in interest to see. Now, next year will be the first year that the high school team will possess kids who have been prime in the robotics field in a competitive way where they depend on each other, and it's departmentalized where people have different jobs. So we're very curious to see how that influences the high school team, and hopefully a positive way where it's a feeding program where the kids have learned fundamental skills to handle dealing with other people, which is a skill that everyone can improve on.
I'm thinking, we had a Girl Scout troop come in last spring and talked about solar power, and then Bob did a great job and got them up on the roof this fall to look at the solar panels. I just recently went with a group of colleagues to Amazon Robotics in North Reading. It's where all the robots from Amazon are made throughout the world. Mr. Sullivan, you're back there too, right? Ms. Terrell arranged the trip. You're taking a group of staff and kids, aren't you, coming up to Amazon Robotics? I'm just wondering if we can grab another date. Carrie, is that something we can arrange? So, what?
He's gotten a few dates, he's brought a few different groups up, so I think they'd be okay.
You guys be interested in, it's not far, it's not a far trip, it's pretty neat to see the process, so maybe we can get you guys to the Amazon facility. So yeah, every robot in the world is made in Amazon, that Amazon uses in their warehouses is made in North Reading, Massachusetts. So it's a neat facility.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
cool. I'm sure we'd be interested in looking into that. See what
Yeah, Ms. Terrell, the high school computer science teacher, one of the high school computer science teachers, has a great connection there, and so she's gotten us in a couple times. So see if we can take advantage of that. So congratulations, you guys represent the community, you represent the school very well. So we're really proud of all of you. So keep up the hard work, right? Because the reward for hard work is more work, right? So there you go. So
Can we do a quick photo op?
we're going to do a slow photo op. So everyone come on up. You guys come on up front.
Stand, so stand.
No, I just want, never mind.
Miss Simon wanted to speak too.
It's okay.
I've got static electricity in my legs, I can't do it. Nancy plugging
How are we doing, guys?
Hang on, let's, here we go. Say potato. Hang on one more second. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone.
Take that.
Is that David sitting back there?
That's Woody.
Yeah. I saw him in church. I didn't see you in church.
The mic's on.
Good, you prepped him? I'm glad to hear that.
Jordan was in a rush to get out.
Yeah.
It was a controlled spill. Could have been worse.
Yeah.
All right. So Mrs. Purchase and
You think Steve had his kid?
yes,
Is
Steve's.
that his kid? Yeah, Henry. Henry is Steve's kid.
Henry. Okay. All right. I didn't catch Henry's last name. So it was.
Again,
Kind of a hard act to follow. It is. It is. You should have deferred.
you had the choice, so that's all right. So
Lesson learned.
again, Madam Chair, all the principals have come up. Actually, we still have. I don't think David's come. Did David come?
No.
David's next. So again, Fox will be next. But again, Carrie's here with Josh from the middle school. So you all know the committee. The committee. So
Welcome.
here you go.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for us to be here. We are extremely excited to share with you tonight a little bit about what we've been doing for the last 6 months or so. I think that I was thinking of a kind of a seasonal reference, and it's kind of the State of the Union, so to speak, as we approach the actual State of the Union, but really wanted to take the time to share with you some of the work that we've done and also look ahead to the future. So we had an incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here, and that was coming in and replacing a leadership team that had been so stable for over 4 decades, which is really something you don't see in education. I'm not sure if we saw it in education, certainly not in my career, in my lifetime. So we recognized as we entered that plan that that change and transition evokes a number of emotions, and that really shaped our entry plan and making sure that we took our time, that we acknowledged that even just by being 2 different people, and if we didn't change or touch or do anything else differently, just by that fact, that was going to be an adjustment for the faculty, for the community, and for the students. So very cognizant of that and very careful of that as we entered into the transition plan. We also knew that going into the transition plan and coming into entering into the district was the need for trust. Trust is really a foundation for our future work, that if we didn't start to earn trust, and we understand it's something that is earned from the beginning, that it would be hard to kind of continue with the work. So starting from our very first meeting, we tried very hard to do that. And really our focus and our theme for the year, for both Josh and I, have been building relationships. So relationships is how, that's how we start to establish trust and build. And it's not just relationships with the faculty, but it's certainly relationships with the community, and most importantly, relationships with students. This has been, again, the focus of our work together, and will continue to be the focus, because while we feel that we've done a nice job starting to build relationships, we know that that work is never truly done, and we'll continue to build upon the foundation that we have. So I will share that I had an opportunity, and I'll call it an opportunity, and it was an opportunity at first that was very overwhelming, that on June 27th, as you know, that there was a professional development day after the students got out. And I had the opportunity to go into, and Josh and I had the opportunity to go to the middle school and have our first time with faculty. And that was extremely overwhelming. I was thinking, like, this is the last place that teachers probably want to be on June 27th. And it truly became one of the best opportunities. We conducted focus groups for about 20 minutes. They were very quick, but we were able to sit with every single faculty member to start to build those relationships, to start to build trust, and to hear what was great about Marshall-Simons Middle School, and also opportunities for growth. So what was a little scary at first really became a great opportunity.
And I think what was an eye-opener for me, being in the district and being around that school in other capacities for a while, when we looked at what came out of those discussions and the themes that were really running throughout the building and throughout all the departments, and walking in there, we knew people were going to be open to different personalities and potential change and things like that. But the fact that they were all kind of in line with what they were looking to do or where they were looking to grow really kind of shocked me. I was expecting to find kind of pockets of people having different ideas, but we really had some themes that were carrying throughout the entire building. So then that led us to the end of the summer. So the first thing we kind of focused on with staff during our week of BPS Con was defining who we are. And as a new administration, after such a significant change, we needed to kind of come together and figure out who we are as a building and who we're going to be going forward. So the first thing we did was we developed our core values. So we spent a lot of time in that first time together as a building talking about those values. We broke up into small groups and let the faculty really, it came from them. It wasn't a top-down aspect at all. So this is where we got to, where we came to pride. It wasn't that one day that we were able to do this. This took us kind of a few different meetings and months of work, kind of going back and forth, in an iterative process to decide, where we were going to end up. So that, what you see there is what we are, where we are with our core values of perseverance, respect, integrity, diversity, and empathy. So we're using those kind of words and to drive every conversation we have and everything we're looking to do with the school. So that was kind of our first step that was started at the end of the summer, ran into kind of October and November. I think it was the end of October-ish, faculty meeting where we really kind of made those concrete. And heading into November, we had a professional development day towards the end of November. Then we were able to shift focus to the kind of mission and vision statements for the school. So again, we had the teachers working kind of in small groups. I think we had 12 groups of teachers working on kind of defining what our mission and vision would be. And we're at the process now where we're going to kind of refine those down from those 12 groups, do some wordsmithing, try to get it down into kind of look for themes and try to get it down into kind of one common area, and then we'll go back out to the faculty and back out to the community and look for some feedback on that. So we're still in the process of working that out.
And I just want to add, I think, again, very impressed and surprised to an extent that a group, 12 separate groups of, 80 or so separate individuals came up with some very similar vision and mission statements, really great alignment, which you don't often see when you have so many people sitting around the table. So we're really impressed with that and really looking forward to continuing that work. So one of the things that we've also worked on is expanding the shared leadership opportunities for our faculty and staff. From day one, it's not my school, it's not Josh's school, it's our school, and it was really important that they have voice throughout the process and continuing on through this first year. This is not something that ends this year because the transition is over. This is something that we will continue to foster going forward. So we've used professional development to really not focus on departments or individuals, but really bring the faculty together. We've also established a faculty advisory committee whose main charge right now is taking a hard look at the schedule, our current schedule. So they're tasked with the schedule review process. And oftentimes when you ask for volunteers, you might get a handful. I will say that we've had 20 to 30 people consistently there. It is an open enrollment, so we are inclusive, and it's a representative group. So it's again, really just very impressed with the willingness to not just identify those opportunities, but also really to come to the table and talk about solutions and explore and have tough conversations. So very impressed. We've also established a school safety and crisis team. Our crisis team is kind of the first responders in the school, but then we've expanded that beyond that to make sure that any classroom teacher, any faculty or staff member who'd like to be part of those discussions can be part of those discussions, so that we're making sure that we're not just waiting for emergencies to happen, but that we're always reflecting upon that and putting plans into place and working on that. And I know that that's something the district has done a lot of work on, but just making sure that we're continuing that conversation. So we're talking about building relationships and continuing to build relationships with families. So communication is the key, and again, communication with various stakeholders. We're in regular communication with our family community. We send direct emails and also post it on the principal blog. It was kind of a nice time to come in because the new website came out, so we were able to transition right there, and that's been a great tool. And feedback we've heard from families is they really like getting that email too. So we're really utilizing two different tools that are available to us. We have an increased Twitter presence, and certainly some of the pictures from tonight will be out there, and trying to more frequently share what's happening during the school day and getting that out. Not as much as we'd like, but certainly want to kind of break down the walls and help people see into their child's day, because we know middle school children don't often go home and share lots of things, so hoping to share some of that. We've established principal coffee hours where Mr. Murphy and I welcome families to come in. It's a more informal setting. We've had one so far. Attendance wasn't fantastic, but we're hopeful that our next principal coffee hour will welcome more folks in, and that's on January 31st. It's an opportunity for us to share things that we're seeing and talking about, but it's also an opportunity for the community to ask questions and the families to ask questions. Our PTO is an active group and has been a great group, and we are also working with them to kind of restart and refresh. So we've had new leadership in that organization, and it's been really fantastic to see that. Another shameless plug, this Thursday night is the next MSMS PTO meeting, and at 6:30 there will be a follow-up to a digital presentation we had in the fall, BEF and the PTO had brought in the Justice Department, did presentations around cyber safety and digital citizenship. And some of the feedback we had gotten was, you know, this is great. How do we do this? How do we monitor it? You know, we have these phones. So Mr. Murphy, along with Officer Shepard and Officer Costa, will be there on Thursday night to kind of as a follow-up and to support that. So our why are our students. As you saw today, we have the best students. That was just a sampling of just the wonderful kids that we have that come through our doors every day. As I was getting ready to leave my former position and come here, a student shared with me that, you know, and I'm going to quote because I think that these are the most important things. Yes, we do kind of events and things to build relationships, but it's really, remember those small chats, no matter the location, all have a big impact on us. And I think that Mr. Murphy and I both try to be present to connect with a student if we notice something as small as a haircut or a new sweatshirt or something, just to make that personal connection as often as we can is really important. We also think that it's important to continue with some of the practices that existed, which include grade level meetings and team meetings. Those include celebrations and fun things. I think that we've both been the recipient of some fun. And it's also a place where when things are happening in our community that we can come together and address those. When we returned last week, we had meetings that were a little bit more of a serious focus in terms of some of the things that we're noticing and also recognizing some of the good things that are happening. We've started student focus groups during our activity block where randomly selected students from a grade level are invited to come meet with Mr. Murphy and I. We have a series of questions, and it's just, again, a really good opportunity to hear from the student's perspective what's great about MSMS and also opportunities and things that we could potentially do differently to support their learning. And then finally, we are planning some student shadow days where we will, I think Mr. Murphy's planning on taking the bus, but that we will, you know, really be able to get a better impression of what the students' experience is from bell to bell. Kind of, you know, be in class with them, be in the lunchroom with them, so that we, again, can just understand from the student's perspective. Sometimes when you're seeing something from only one perspective, you're not seeing the whole picture. So excited about that.
So what we've learned a good amount about our community, and I think for me, I always thought that I knew a lot about what was going on in that building and a lot about the teachers there and the students there. And as much as I felt like I did know, I'm learning stuff every single day. And you know, I'm honestly amazed by the students we have in this town and the energy that they bring to that building every single day. And I've heard Dr. Conti talk about it in the past about how you know, summers are good to kind of get work done and to do some of the things you need to do, but that first day back, it's just a totally different world when students are in the building. As you saw tonight, we have students that are eager for more. I think that's one thing I've learned is that the group of kids that we have in this town, and specifically in our school, are always looking for to consume more information, and they're ready for more. So it's kind of exciting for somebody from our perspective just to think of what we'll be able to accomplish. So, you know, pictures there. We had the Computer Science Week, the Computer Science for All. We spent 2 weeks kind of doing some of that stuff there. Few of the individuals are musically inclined in our building, and I really wish we could kind of share, or you were able to kind of witness some of the mornings we've had. So at least once a month, we've had some of the faculty will, as the students are entering the building, we'll bring them in via song, and they'll be playing together. I think their official name is the G Block Drifters. If you haven't seen them or perform locally, you can check our Twitter feed because there should be some nice videos there. But it's just the faculty and staff that we have. They don't just punch a clock for a paycheck, and I think it's obvious being around them that they're there for all the right reasons, and they're there because they love what they do. They love building relationships with these kids, and they love you know, watching them grow. The community, we can't say enough about this community. Recently we had the Burlington Fire Department support one of our programs in our building on a toy drive where they came with the fire truck, picked up all the toys before the holidays. We've worked with the Veterans Department. The BEF has been there for a lot of different things in our PTO. So we can't say enough about the relationships we've seen and what we've learned, but the the amount of support we get full circle is amazing.
So what we have accomplished, we've established relationships, and again, we were talking about tenses because we were like, have we built relationships? Are we building relationships? We've established relationships. We have started to build relationships, and we'll continue to build relationships. We have done our best, and one of the things that we said on June 27th was we weren't just going to engage in change for change's sake, that there would be a process that we were going to take this year and really learn from what has been, some tried and true parts of the culture. So we've done our best to honor those traditions while also trying to update some of those traditions and listening to feedback from the faculty. So some of our assemblies, some of the feedback we got was they were a little too long. And so working with, again, a small group of volunteer teachers who engaged in the conversation, we said, okay, we will continue the assemblies this year, but we'll put some parameters on them, and we'll kind of go through that year. And I think that that's been a very successful model. We have increased after-school offerings with the support of the committee, and we're very grateful for that, whether it's the extended day program that is providing a safe place for students until their families are able to get home from work and things. I can't say enough for that program and seeing the kids. It's just such a nice place to be. Some days when you're having a bad day, it's great to go down there and see, and the kids are always like, hey, and they're just really have established a community within a community, which I think is fantastic. Our after-school offerings, we were in the Learning Commons today. We had National History Day going on, and students who are so engaged in different topics and excited about it, and they didn't need any prompting to get started. Walked around, they were already doing their research before the teachers even got there. We had Math Olympiad, which had been a program that has been established, but certainly has great membership. We've established a student council that's getting started. So just really great things that are happening, and we want to continue with those opportunities. And then again, the increased shared leadership opportunities for our faculty. And then the last is the what's next. And I think that's, I think kind of on the head of everybody's, the tip of everybody's tongue is what's next. We are still in the middle of our first year. We are still in a learning year. So that's an important piece to recognize. We're going to continue to build trusting relationships with all stakeholders and learn through that process. We're going to continue our schedule review process. And we're not sure where that's going to go. It may be that we're able to kind of move forward, or it may be that we need more time to look at that, and that's okay. And then we're also going to use what we've learned to begin to identify opportunities for continued growth. We know that there are some things that are kind of happening that are outside of our control. Certainly the social studies and science curriculum frameworks being new. And again, thank you to the support of the committee. We have curriculum coordinators that will be in place to help support that work. And right now we're learning about the transitions. It's hard to believe, I know Mr. Adubato and Mr. Sullivan are here to talk about the program of studies. It's hard to believe that we've already started to have those conversations and really getting prepared for that transition. And I think that it's really important that we start to prepare for that 5th to 6th grade transition. So spending time getting to know outside of the 4 walls of Marshall-Simons. I am new to Burlington, so I haven't had that opportunity, so I'm really looking forward to visiting elementary schools, getting to know kind of the K-12 picture. And sometimes it's hard to do with the time that we have, because there's just the 2 of us, and so we're looking forward to that. I want to thank the Burlington Education Foundation. They have supported a training to bring a new transition program to Medway that we're really excited about, and we'll share more about that later. But certainly I think transitions are really important, and being in the middle, literally kind of having both ends of a transition, I think is really important as well. And then we will come together and kind of identify an area of focus and really hone in on that and think about the future. So we're still in the middle of the transition. We have a lot of exciting things happening. I can't say enough about the community, and I can't say enough about the students, and I can't say enough about the faculty. It truly has been, personally and professionally, the best transition that I could have asked for. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy?
Yes, thank you. Welcome, and thank you for that presentation. I thought it was well done. coming into a situation like you guys did is obviously a very difficult thing, and it's just based on what I've heard tonight and the things that you talked about, you clearly gave it a lot of thought, and I think it seems to me you're doing it the right way. You're being very inclusive. You want to get people involved. There's good communication. You guys are obviously enthused about your job and giving it your full efforts to do that. But it just seems to me that you've taken great steps towards transitioning in and getting to know, Josh obviously has been around the town, you're getting to know the town. But I was very impressed by the presentation and the thought and the planning that you guys clearly did leading into the school year, and you seem to be carrying it through, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Middle school is a great place. It's always been a great place. We've got a great group of kids down there, great faculty, and I think now with your leadership, there's not necessarily right ways and wrong ways, but there are different ways of doing things, and I was very impressed with your presentation.
Thank you.
Mrs. Monaco?
Excellent presentation. It's interesting from this side of the table to see as the kids come in and listen to the administrators and form the kind of not an opinion, but sort of a sense of what's going on in Burlington in education. And I feel really good about it. I was looking at all of the kids that were here in the robotics group and thinking about just how strong the educational factor is. You know, these are kids that are, they're on the cutting edge of things that a few years ago didn't even exist. And you're running the school that they're in, and they're learning all that stuff there. It's research-based, and as you said, they're so eager for more. And the more we can give them, the more they'll absorb. And, you know, they're going to be, I don't know, growing food on Mars or whatever they're going to do. But, you know, just it's so exciting to see them so advanced in learning and so eager to be so advanced in learning. And they're totally dependent on you and the faculty and how it all comes together. And I wish you the absolute best in pulling it all together and having a great transition and then getting beyond the transition. But I'm just very, very proud of how it's all working out. I think we've got a great thing going here, and you're a big part of it.
Well, thank you very much. That's very kind.
Most of what I was going to say has already been said, I think, by my colleagues here on the committee. I was just thinking as you were making the presentation this evening how difficult change is. I mean, we all like to we all have our own way of doing things, and when you try to change people, it's not easy. And I like the way you're pacing the whole program and incorporating all of the faculty into the conversations about how you're going to change and whether it makes sense to change. Some things, as you said, we might not want to change, and other things we might want to amend or you know, improve and things of that sort. So I like your presentation tonight. I thought it was well done. I thought it was thoughtful, and I think it's the way to get you know, professionals to buy into it, parents to buy into it. As school committee members over the years, we've fielded a lot of questions, and a lot of parents at the middle school level, you know, they analyze things and they question you and they have a lot of pushback, and it's not an easy job to deal with all of those things, and I think that you're on a great path. So I wish you success, and look forward to your next report.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Simon?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for making what had potential to be difficult and you know, change and stuff into what seems like it's a very successful transition. You know, I feel like you're covering all the bases, you're doing all the right things, and when I say the right things, there's not one right thing, but the things that I would hope, and you know, including all of the students, the faculty, the families, the community, including how people feel about things, including people in decision-making. And I'm not surprised, because that's sort of what I've seen as you've come in, but I'm delighted to hear what's going on, and I'm just looking forward to more wonderful things at the middle school.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your time tonight. This overview was excellent. And what kept coming to my mind as you were talking and listening was grace and professionalism. The outgoing administration left with grace and professionalism, and the new administration came in just as they had left, and it really is a testament to Burlington. It's a testament to the faculty and the administration in how to take such a long leadership and turn it over in a way that is meaningful and is a role model for the students too, of how you work with someone and how you do change that over, because it can be very difficult. So I want to thank you and everyone for that, including the faculty. The welcome back night that was in August was excellent. You had so many students, 6th graders, who have been very nervous, history of time, beginning of time, but you allowing the 7th and 8th graders also, anytime the parents are in the building with their students, I mean with their children, there's just this level of energy and excitement. And then that carries over in the house too, because you have that connection with your child of being in that building, talking to some teachers, seeing where their classrooms were. And at a time when so many middle school students and other students are like, I don't want to go back to school, that energy, I left that night and I couldn't get over that energy for back to school at a middle school age level. So I want to thank you for doing that, and again the administration, because the 6th grade teachers were there and other administration, and that's a night out that they don't want to be back at school anytime sooner. So, but that connection with the parents and the students and the school, I think really helps to set the tone. And then lastly, looking at, we have the high school program studies before us, we have the administration here from them, and we've seen Memorial School and Francis Wyman, and just the continuum of pride in the work and the curriculum and how to be good people, good students, is just right from K straight through to 12th grade, and this middle piece, seeing this really ties it all together. So again, I'm just very, very impressed and very proud to be in Burlington, have my students go through the program and just see it all in one linear motion. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So again, Madam Chair, it's been exciting to work with Carrie and Josh, and it's been such a busy fall that I really haven't been there that much. So all that you saw tonight is really the efforts of Carrie and Josh alone, and they've just done a phenomenal job. Josh is actually happy I haven't been there very much. But because he knows me a little bit longer. So, but I'm saying it's an age group that I am familiar with, that sort of is a passion of mine, and I just think starting with relationships, starting with trust is just the way to go. And again, it's excited to have someone from an outside perspective here in town, and we're learning as much from you as you're learning from us. So again, thank you. Turning those relationships, I think you have, I'm not sure if you've met everyone from Ways and Means. This isn't the full Ways and Means, but this is the education group. So I'm not sure if you met Sue Harrigan, John Eiler, and then Steve Moran, father of Henry. So, we have, so again, Carrie is here, and I think you've been there. And then Mr. Nelson just has one very quick question to ask you, and again, we'll be getting into that more as we move forward. But I just wanted to give you again a brief opportunity, because I think there's certainly something that we've discussed. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to.
Yeah, I made the mistake of asking this question many months ago, actually, eons ago. And I think the question was something along the lines of, is there anything that you need the school committee to do to help support your programs going forward? And if there is, let us know. Let us know.
So I appreciate that. I think that one of the things that we realize is one, again, I think in Burlington we do have a number of resources available, and certainly a clear vision and, you know, support from the district. So a lot of, you know, the transition has been easy because there is a clear path for the district to follow and go. I think one of the things that, not necessarily money, but one of the things that would be really great is if you could give us more time. And I mean that in ways of, I think, you know, Josh and I have been working incredibly hard and, you know, feel like we're making progress and feel like we're doing that, and not feeling as if we're being as effective as we could be in terms of managing a building with almost 800 students, middle school aged students who have a variety of needs. You know, oftentimes we spend our time managing that piece of the work and not necessarily engaging in the instructional leadership pieces and really the support of our faculty. Our faculty is amazing, and they will, there's not a doubt in my mind that, you know, given the right support, continue to grow and do what's right by kids, because they do what's right by kids every day. But I'm not sure that Josh and I always feel like we're doing right by them. So to answer your question, and yes, Mrs. Monaco, there might be a piece, you know, as we've submitted the budget this year, we are asking for a second assistant principal going forward to support the work. And certainly if we were looking at kind of continuing what's there, we could kind of get by, but I do think that that's shortchanging our teachers and ultimately our students going forward.
Through the chair, you'll be happy to know that the committee is already aware of that need, and we're already hopeful that we're going to be able to incorporate some changes in this year's budget.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Right. And Ways and Means is anxious to help us out as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
No.
Thanks a lot. Great job.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have transportation consultant, or do
Again,
you
I was
wanna
gonna,
jump?
do you mind if I jump
No,
around a
you
little
can
bit?
jump.
I'm actually, you've been very patient, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Adubato, so would you like to come up and discuss the program of studies from the high school? Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Want me to start? You wanna?
Well, no, again, well, I see you saw a small group of kids who you're gonna be seeing next year, so, again, I think,
You're ready. They're primed and ready.
yeah, it's good. Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Adubato, I don't believe need any introduction, so with no further ado, Mark.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for having us again. As we do every year, we're going to highlight some aspects of the 1920 program of studies for you. It's not a comprehensive presentation, as you've had the whole program for some time. So what we'll do is highlight some of the new courses that are being proposed, some modifications, and some various changes that we'd like to highlight for your attention before you vote on it at the next meeting. So as always, the cover designed by a student, this one by Maeve O'Callahan, class of 2022. And Mr. Missler and Mr. Rakovich always give their time in their classes with the little competition that they have amongst the kids. So that is this year's design. So we'll start off with some of the new courses that you'll see, and this new science course that's being proposed will make a little more sense a little later on in the presentation when we talk about a new pathway that is being proposed for incoming 9th graders at the high school. But this physical science class is designed to be an introduction sophomore class, the concepts of chemistry and physics. And this would be for students who aren't, who take a biology class as a freshman and aren't quite ready to go into a chemistry or a physics class quite yet. And you can read the different concepts that it have, but it would be a bridge for some of those students that would need to polish up on some of the mathematical skills prior to going into a higher level science. A class that was new last year, but addition to the classes, we're going to offer at an honors level the Introduction to Emergency Medicine. It's a class that Mr. Toda, who's an EMT himself, has taught this year. They actually just went to the Hanscom Air Force Base yesterday and visited the MedFlight hangar that they have with their helicopter and their different apparatus on site. It's been a very popular course with students, and he'd like to offer it at a higher level, so it's being added as an honors course. And as we have in the past, any honors courses that are being added to the program will phase in as to not give any disadvantages to students in current grades who took it at a college prep level to then have a peer take it at a higher level for the weight and the GPA. So any courses that you see that are added at a higher level will always be phased in through kids coming up from the middle school having it offered that way.
Oh, yeah, sure. Just to piggyback too, that the Introduction to Emergency Medicine, the enrollment this year is at 90. So we had 90 kids take the course. It's very popular. So I think Mr. Toda really thinks by offering the honors section, it's gonna certainly add value to that course. Science and Society in the 21st Century is another course. I believe Jill Graham proposed this course, and you can see the description, but I think they're just trying to come up with different science classes than the typical science classes. So I think you can see EMT and then this course as well. It really opens up the repertoire of the science program. It allows students that, you know, may not have taken an elective science class in the past to jump in and take a science class. So I think this will be a good addition to the program of studies. We're going to have a new AP class in place next year, and that would be AP French. Mr. McGuire, he's in his second year. The French program seems to be growing quite a bit, and with the AP program, as a reminder, teachers need to actually be approved now through AP. Usually teachers will work on the AP approval over the summer, but a credit to Mr. McGuire, he's already got the AP approval now, so that's great. So he's already gone through the advanced placement process, which requires him essentially to submit a syllabus. It's reviewed and edited and updated by the teacher. So that course will be up and running and ready for next year.
And I apologize, this looks much bigger on my screen than it does up there, so hopefully people aren't trying to, it's Pat Strand, hope you're not trying to read along. Another class is fashion, marketing, and retail selling. Again, as teachers find interest that kids have, they're proposing these types of classes in the program. So retail merchandising and selling business course for students considering a career in fashion design, merchandising, retailing, or related areas. So again, I think this is a testament to teachers listening to kids and paying attention to what their interests currently are, and trying to create classes that fit that. It also ties into a lot of the work that Ms. Anderson has been doing with the DECA program and some of the competitions that they do, that they're being asked to tie in some of these skills at these local and regional competitions. The music department, as you know, the district has, I'm not exactly for how many years, but they started a string program several years ago, and those kids are now starting to matriculate up into the high school. So Mr. Middleton is proposing the continuation of the program for these kids at the high school. So you'll see 628, 629 college prep and honors string ensemble. And again, this is a continuation of the program that was added, Dr. Conti, what, 5 or 6 years ago or something. We're not deleting any courses from the program this year, so that is easy. The Art and Design Department, Mr. Rakovich has made some changes to the program. He's changed a lot of the course names. He's really worked, and you see the draft program that you have, he's really reworded the kind of programmatic overview for the courses. He's really trying to encourage students, whether it's at a intermediate or a foundational level, or whether it's at an advanced level, to sign up for the fine arts. Our enrollment has been slightly dipping in these types of classes as we add a variety of different types of electives to the program, not only in the science, English, and social studies departments, but now the business department. It's becoming real competitive to get students to sign up for your classes. So while all those classes are essentially the same, a lot of the names were changed to make them look more appealing, to be more systematic in terms of a flow or a sequence of courses that you could take. So not a lot of changes per se, but a lot of verbiage changes in terms of describing to students what it is that the program has to offer. Did I miss anything with that sum up?
No, I just think, again, we had to put a link in so you could take a look at it a little bit closer, but I think just overall, like Mark said, George has done a lot of work on this. He's now a K through 12 coordinator, so he's really trying to align things, and he thinks honors offerings for incoming freshmen are important. He thinks that incoming freshmen having the ability, in the past it was just design, but having the ability now to take photography, ceramics as a freshman, he thinks can be much more appealing to incoming freshmen. And he's really added a focus for a student that wants to major in art. So he has created a four-year pathway for students that really want to focus in on art right off the bat.
So the science department, so I know this has been a conversation for several years about science offerings at the high school, specifically incoming ninth graders and what science they're being asked to take. In the past, incoming freshmen have always had the choice to take either a biology or a physics route. It's created a lot of problems in the sense that it creates scheduling difficulties. It creates a lack of consistency in kind of the science experience at the high school. It created inconsistencies and I'm not sure what the best way to put this, an expectation of what the most rigorous course of program is at the high school. We have found a lot of our students were leaning or going towards the biology route. So as you see, what is being proposed is that every incoming freshman, starting with the class of 2022, would take biology. There are several reasons for this. As I mentioned, the flexibility of scheduling and allowing juniors and seniors to take more science electives or more elective options as they get into the higher grades. The MCAS experience, not that we should cater things to the MCAS, but it makes the MCAS preparatory stuff a lot easier because all the students will be taking the same exam in the same year. We did add that course we talked about, the fundamentals class, for the students that come out of bio but aren't ready for a physics or a chemistry experience. So those students will have that bridge. Again, it provides a more uniform teaching and learning experience for science, for students taking science courses at the high school. And I think it'll finally kind of unify and really simplify the process for students coming into the high school.
I was going to say, you want to show them the pathway, or they can look at it.
Yeah, so I can actually.
May I ask a question
I do
about
have
it?
it up, yeah. Yeah,
Or
sure.
do you want me to wait till the end?
You can wait.
Oh.
You can ask.
Okay. I noticed in the pathways there isn't an option for AP Bio the way it's written right now. Are sophomores still allowed to take an AP as a sophomore?
Yes. Yeah.
So will they now they didn't have very many options. I think AP Bio was one, and then I forget what other AP class was offered as a sophomore level.
In the science area, there were no other AP courses offered for sophomores, but in other departments, there was AP, and it still will be offered AP
English,
U.S. history
Okay.
for sophomore, freshmen
Yes.
going into sophomore year.
Right.
It was U.S., it was biology, music theory.
Okay, so now it'll just be either music theory or U.S. history.
No, AP biology, a sophomore could still take that. I think we just need to double check.
It's probably an oversight on this flow chart. I mean, I
Okay.
think in terms of a logical sequence, I think
Yep.
Mrs. Potters was putting it down because that's what a typical sequence would be like, but
Mhm.
students would still have the option to take honors biology as a freshman, AP biology as a sophomore.
Okay, so they'd have three choices.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
And these are the, and you have copies of these too. These would be the recommended pathways for students at the different levels at the high school. Where are you looking? Right down here?
Yeah, it's possible, but required.
Which one, Pat?
All right,
The
down here.
wording, I don't know, is that typical, or is it recommended or required, is kind of
It's recommended.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We don't use the word required a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought that was the case.
And then, because it's not listed here on this pathways chart, the guidance department would be familiar with the concept that a rising sophomore might want to sign up for AP biology. So they would be making sure, if they showed them this chart, they would say, and for the kids who would be appropriate or might be interested, they would mention it too. Okay.
Yeah, and we can
Yeah.
add, we'll add it to that chart too.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And
Thanks.
really a driving force for the AP bio classes is the honors biology teacher as well. You know, their recommendation is an important piece to the process.
Thank you.
So in the English department, the English class that used to be called the senior class was British literature. It's just going to be called senior English. They're getting away from specifically British literature, so to call it that really doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's just going to be called senior English as they expand. I'm sorry?
They're Brexiting?
They're Brexiting, yes. And then young adult fiction will include grades 11 and 12 in addition to current 9th and 10th graders. So some changes in the business department, personal finance and financial management, previously called accounting and personal finance, and business law and ethics was previously called business law. Again, just some tweaking of the names there. Yeah.
Just on the business department too, it's not in here. It came in a little bit later. It is in the reflected in the program of studies, but the Introduction to Business and Management class, which has been offered as a CP for incoming freshmen, they added an honors option as well. So an incoming freshman has the option to take, again, we try to roll these things in with incoming classes. So an incoming freshman, it's not listed here, but they could take honors, Introduction to Business, or CP. So they have an extra option.
And then I'll let Joe talk about this, but we've been really trying to push the dual enrollment experience at the high school the last several years, and Joe has really been instrumental working with the different local colleges as well as the department heads at the high school. So Joe can.
Well, this goes back to just, and I say it every year, but from the model that Dr. Conti was familiar with, and this now goes back over 10 years, but there were students that were graduating at certain high schools in the country that would graduate with an associate degree, which is really, you know, a great concept to try to embrace. And so, over the past several years, we've been trying to build the program up. There's a lot that goes into it in terms of teachers, because our teachers need to become adjunct professors. They need their curriculum reviewed. They need to work with the local community college, which is Middlesex in this case. And so they just need to make sure that the curriculum's in alignment and so on and so forth. So we had a big jump the past 2 years, really. You know, psych has been a traditional dual enrollment course. Calculus has been a traditional dual enrollment course. Programming came on board a couple of years ago. This year, Human Anatomy and AP Lit have both come on board, and we're hoping to get Honors Senior English on board as well. So just by way of explaining again, our teachers are adjunct professors at Middlesex. They're teaching their existing Burlington High School course. But if a student chooses to, they can pay $92 per credit, which is the 3 credit courses for the most part. And they can also elect to get college credit. So what that means is, in theory now, a student could graduate with, you know, close to 20 credits now of actual college credit. The one course that's not listed here, and we probably should list it, is Latin 5. The reason it's not listed is Latin 5 is done with UMass Boston. And Greg Stringer has done a lot of work behind the scenes on that. That's actually not listed here. The courses listed here are based on our agreement with Middlesex Community College. So we review it every year. If we can get Honors Senior English on board, I think that really will add to our dual enrollment numbers. And students do need to meet certain prerequisites for these courses. Because all our sophomores take the PSAT, we use that as the kind of the gateway now to being dual enrollment eligible. So I think the numbers are starting to certainly rise. I think students and parents are seeing the value, in the fact that they could have, now we're pushing a semester of college.
And again, this isn't to discount advanced placement courses, but advanced placement courses oftentimes get you placement in college, so you could place out of an introductory course, but don't necessarily get you, you would still need to pay for all the credits as you go through. So by taking getting a college credit from an accredited institution like Middlesex Community College, then if you're in a four-year college, for instance, or even if you want to continue towards your associates, they have to accept those credits because they're coming from an accredited institution. And $92 a credit for those of you who are paying current tuition is not a bad deal. So even if you wanted to continue to do 4 years of credits at an undergraduate, you would still be then, I think, have the opportunity in your schedule to take even more classes because they would have to count some of the introductory courses you have. So that's really the difference between an advanced placement course and a dual enrollment course. And the dual enrollment model that I think works well is it doesn't take kids off of their high school campus. So they're not needing to go to Middlesex. They're here with their high school teachers. They get to continue the social aspect of high school, which is actually one of the more important things in their lives. And just by aligning the curriculum, we also get to then align our standards as well and our expectations as well, because the Middlesex community, the educators there are also looking at the content and the standards here as well. So it's a great standardization exercise. And I think Middlesex is a very strong institution, and a lot of our kids start their college careers at Middlesex as well, so this really gives them a jump on that at a very cost-effective way. Joe, do they get 2 transcripts? Is that correct, how this looks?
Yes, they would essentially request a course, transcript from Middlesex. And now what we're starting to see is, which this will be interesting, but dual enrollment versus AP, colleges are looking at dual enrollment now as the same weight as an AP. So that's kind of a game changer to some extent as well. And additionally, even if a student took one dual enrollment class in their experience, they're going off to college. It may not necessarily be a savings, but that student could take one less course in their freshman year. And I think transitioning from high school to college, that opportunity can be helpful as well.
Just in terms of survivability, so
Correct.
Getting through.
Retention rates and, yep.
Ms. Simon?
Yeah, before we leave the dual enrollment, because this is a first reading, and we're talking about what's going to be in the program of studies, I understand why you listed only the Middlesex courses here, but I think it would be important to have in the book that the dual enrollment course available through UMass Boston. And
Yes, we will
probably right
definitely
here.
add that in. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We'll have some more questions at the end, probably.
Sure.
We will.
This is really this is not going into the program of studies this year. We just wanted to inform the school committee about this concept of pathways. So we're starting at the high school to develop specific pathways, and this was really all generated from a grant that Shireen Tyrell, our computer science teacher, had applied for. And it looks like she's going to hopefully get some money to start working on creating a specific pathway for students interested in computer science, software development, which is on the next slide. We can take a look at that in a minute, but so it's not, with the concept of the pathways, we're trying to come up with a way to communicate various pathways, not only for our high school students, but even for our incoming 8th graders. So at this point in time, they're presented with a program of studies, they're presented with what they're required to take freshman year, but we really want to start to push the concept of thinking what's coming next after high school. And our career committee, that's been really led by Shannon Janovitz, who's doing an unbelievable job getting career speakers to come in. I know I've seen school committee members at some of those events in the past, and We're trying to tie everything together, so the concept of these pathways is essentially looking at various career areas in developing a pathway, or kind of list different types of careers that would be available if you had a certain area of focus. You know, it's not as specific as, say, a college major, but I think it's not that a student would necessarily have to commit to a pathway. They could, but if we want students to really start to think about, you know, not only college, if that's their plan, could be career, but thinking about post-high school. So we're really trying to introduce this concept. It's a working draft. We just kind of want you to be aware. And if you jump to the next slide, that this is an actual pathway that will be in existence and is in our program of studies in our computer science section. So this pathway would lead to a certificate, and it would also allow Burlington High School to receive grant money if we can start to promote this particular pathway. And I know Dr. Conti has been quite involved with this process as well, as has Mr. Sullivan, and they could probably elaborate more on the grant, but we just wanted to throw out the pathway concept and get it out there, and hopefully next year we'll have something more of a specific plan and finalize that for next year. So we already have something ready for next year.
So again, just connected to that, and maybe we'll bring Ms. Terrell in again, Mark, with you when you come back. But we were notified right before break that we were pleased to notify you that Burlington Public Schools has been awarded an FY19 Innovation Pathway Planning Grant of $10,000. So we want to thank you for your commitment to developing Innovation Pathway Program at your institution. And then it's signed, obviously, it's signed by Governor Baker and by Lieutenant Governor Polito. So we do have some resources to help with this. I think we're seeing a lot of need to do what they're calling, I have to get all the language right, personalization of curriculum. Some of our tools are allowing us to do that a lot more. So trying to create pathways that the students can personalize as they go through high school. And again, computer science is going to be an area that is continuing to expand, and that's it. So Mark, I'm not sure if you want to add anything, but Shireen's done again a great job for us. So.
Yeah, no, she's done a fantastic job, and again, I think the, like Joe mentioned, the Career Exploration Committee that we have, you know, it encompasses the Job Shadow Day, the Career Speaker Day, and then the Senior Internship Program that seniors are eligible to go on in the spring. I think the goal is to get them thinking kind of big picture about what it is that they want to do, and tie some of their, you know, course choices and experiences and conversations, frankly, that they're having with people that are in various industries, just to get the thought process going about and tying in the guidance department and the college decisions and the college planning around it. So we had been doing a lot of these things in isolation, but putting them all together as kind of a cohesive plan for kids as they come in, then to be able to identify pathways at the high school to really hone in on those skills, I think will be a nice feature for students as they begin to plan. Not that they're married to any of these choices necessarily, but getting them to think about it is the real important thing at these ages.
Mrs. Monco?
I think it's great to see these, but it also brings to mind the conflicts that kids face. And I know in my particular family, there are a lot of kids and a lot of conflicts over the years. And the one that jumps out is that I have run into repeatedly with my own kids, grandkids, and I think Mr. Isla might share this concern with me, is the students that are very technically oriented and really want to do these computer science, math, pathway programs. Many of them are also very musical. And that is a huge conflict. I mean, my grandson was here tonight. I said to him the other day, what are you going to do next year? Are you going to take the music programs and do band? Or are you going to take a computer science course? And he said, I'm really stuck. He said, I think I'm going to do band because I need to be social. And that means he can't do computer science work. And I have run into that repeatedly. John did too with his kids. it's a real tough dilemma for kids. And if you're just working on this, if it's still in the concept phase, I would really like to ask you to think about how to make some of these courses accessible to these kids. You know, they'd rather not take some of the required courses that they have to take and take the pathway and take the music. But they really have to choose between them, and it really seems unfair that they have to make that choice.
Joe, can I jump in on that just for a second, maybe, and you can answer if you'd like, but I'll maybe spare you a little bit. So there's only so many periods in a day, so I'm saying that's a limiting factor. But the bigger limiting factor for us, we've actually made some progress on, is we're a Mass Core community. So, Joe, I want to make sure I get this correct. So, Mass Core is what the state defines as the courses they want to see students take as a high school graduate for state universities and colleges. So that's 4 English, 4 math, I think it was 3 science, 3 social studies, and 5 electives, and 2 languages, and they had to be continuous languages. Couldn't take Spanish 1, French 1, you had to take Spanish 1, Spanish 2. So you had to take 2 sequential years of foreign language. That's a pretty packed 4 years right there. Part of the dilemma that we had that was impacting students, at least from my perspective, was that computer science was considered an elective. So recently, last spring, we petitioned the Board of Higher Ed and the K-12 State Board to consider computer science a core course, and they've made that change. So computer science is going to be considered a core science or a core math. So it would replace one of the 4. So
Like which? Like how? What are you going to
they would
replace?
select. So again, I think there's a lot of historical pressure, and we don't need to get into educational history, but there's a fairly historical, and I'm sure it goes back, I know it goes back to the 1890s, when the science sequence was developed. So that was biology, chemistry, physics, and again, it was done in that sequence because it was alphabetical, and many high schools still have that same sequence that exists today. The math sequence is a very calculus-based sequence, right? So how many of us experienced algebra sometime in middle school, right? Geometry, algebra 2, trig, pre-calc, or whatever they want to call it, and then calc. So with those established pathways, it's really hard to fit in a new knowledge, something like computer science. So you either need to integrate it into a course, which is really hard to do, but they're starting to develop courses like that. I think there's a course out of MIT called Bootstrap, which is an Algebra 1 course taught using computer science or computational thinking. Patrick, Diana, jump in if I'm misstating anything. I know you guys are into this stuff. Or we need to, again, disrupt some sequencing, but then students need to make some different choices. So it may be that instead of, you could do biology, computer science, physics, or again, not that chemistry is not important, but I'm saying you could add that in. Part of the challenging is we have a very active state legislature, and now they've also added, you haven't gotten to it yet, but they've added a civics requirement now for high school graduation. So kids have to do a civics project coming up in 8th grade as well, right? So middle school folks are going to nod, and then they're going to have to do some sort of civics project demonstration in order to earn a high school diploma as well. So we have to fit that in. So honestly, it's a matter of getting enough time in the day and then having some flexibility. Mark, you're working on a schedule that may create some more room, but until we think about those sequences a little bit differently and offering some different courses, I think we're going to try to we're going to continue to have some conflicts, and so but we're trying to create those pathways where kids would have the opportunity to participate in the fine arts, because those are skills that are just as important. When you talk to the Amazon robotics recruiters, they want musicians, they want creative thinkers, they want problem solvers, they want kids who can work together. They didn't mention anything about sort of, they obviously want some content skill, but they're looking for all those activities as well.
Can't fit them in.
Well, we have to. So I'm saying, I just think this idea that we have to be sort of wedded to either a calculus pathway or to a sequence of content that's existed for a long period of time, we have to disrupt that a little bit. And I think having computer science count as a core course makes sense, we'd like them now to count it as an exam course. And again, I don't want to distract from the program of studies too much, but we're at a very interesting time where what students have to do from the state's perspective, to earn a high school diploma is also changing. So we'd like computer science to count towards that as well. So, and that's, again, that's not the case right now. So we're kind of stuck. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but I don't want to detract from the program of studies.
And I believe Mass Corps is also using computer science potentially as not just science, but a math.
Correct. They can choose, but it can be a core, one of the two. But the initial problem was, when we were hearing from lots of kids and teachers, is if it was only as an elective, then they weren't thinking about it as a science or a math core class. So, and if it's not a core, and again, our freshmen have the choice of one elective, isn't that true, if they take sort of a full schedule? So that's where the conflict comes, because if the one elective is a music class, and if you're only thinking of computer science as an elective, then you're competing against other electives. So that's part of the reason we have to try to build in a core pathway. It's not easy, though, and again, it's such a low-level conversation. Never mind finding the teacher to teach computer science and getting the content and making sure it's relevant and high level and authentic. It's honestly, it's a time and space problem because the kids are really booked up. Mr. Eiler, you wanted to comment, so. So through the chair, Madam Chair, I didn't mean to usurp your authority.
No,
Al, you can call me Al Haig.
Just speaking as a recent high school parent, and you're absolutely right. You know, being involved with band is definitely taking up a slot, and you know there is only so much time. And I appreciate you all working with me. I know I was a difficult parent at times.
Mr. Eiler, don't sell yourself short. You were an extremely difficult. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think the area for an opportunity here that I saw, and you know, I sure have a STEM focus. One of the problems was in the area of prerequisites, and I think there's an opportunity there. So, for instance, if you want to take, it was very difficult at the time that my kids were at school to take AP biology, chemistry, and physics, given that, at least according to current studies at the time, regular biology was a requirement for AP biology, regular chemistry is a requirement for AP chemistry. You know, so there just weren't enough years to do everything. And I think at times that may be appropriate. And by the way, being able to take AP programming was not really an option, because that also had a prerequisite of, I think, regular programming course of time. So the prerequisites were really causing an issue in getting to the AP courses. So the thing that I would suggest looking at is I think prerequisites are a good idea. I think in general, I would suggest there should be some flexibility in being able to bypass prerequisite if the student shows an aptitude and ability to do that. That would allow them to take the AP course. Otherwise, you're effectively locking people out of these AP courses that would be quite ready to take them, but because the prerequisites are very rigid, you know, in an attempt to be the same for everyone, we're penalizing everyone equally as opposed to giving everyone equal opportunity. So I was just looking at that.
And we have developed some opt-out procedures for certain courses so that students do have the option to take a test at the end of the year to demonstrate proficiency. And it's accessible to all students and advertised to all kids who want to do it. So particularly in the math and science departments, they do have the option to, I don't think it was available for your guys, but they do now have the option to opt out of prerequisites if they demonstrate proficiency to get into those AP classes. Not all of them, but it's a good point. Thank you.
And Ms. Simon has one more question.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to weigh in on this. I like the idea of pathways for kids who are really sort of know what they're interested in, but I also have a concern that in our society, I think there's a lot to be said for all of this career-focused stuff and curriculum and job shadowing days and bringing in speakers, and I think it really helps kids see the authenticity and the real life experience of where are we going with this calculus class or this French class or whatever it may be. And I do think that those are valuable and that, you know, but I also feel like it's important for high school kids not to have to decide. And that if there's too much weight put on these pathway curriculum sequences, then kids, you know, don't then end up taking that elective on environmental science that they never would have thought of if they were on a path to take all the computer science classes. There's nothing wrong with all the computer science classes. There's some kids where that's all they want to do, and that's great. But I also feel like even when we send our seniors off to college, what are you going to major in? I changed my mind 3 times in college. And I would like us to keep on the table that openness. What else could you learn about? What areas might interest you that we don't offer right now or that you haven't taken a class in? And I'd like to expand our kids in that way. In some ways, these pathways are expanding opportunities for our students, and I don't want to take away from that. But I want us to keep in mind that expanding opportunities for our kids also includes expanding the opportunity to take something that they wouldn't have otherwise taken because there was a sequence. And in my mind, the AP discussion is similar. And I'm glad to hear that the issues that you came up with when your children were in high school have been addressed by some of these opt-out, test-out kinds of opportunities. But AP classes are supposedly college classes. So again, I think it's wonderful that we offer a robust AP curriculum, and there are some kids who want to take those classes in 10th grade. But I also really support that kids take high school classes in high school, and that they not feel that they have to take 8 AP classes in high school or however many the number is these days. So again, I don't want to say at all that I'm against AP classes, but I also want us to remember that there's that other aspect. And I think that some of what happens with the kids who want to do computer science and they want to do music. But I also want to reinforce what Dr. Conti said, which is there are only so many periods in the day. There's only so many hours in the day. And, you know, my children had to choose between band and chorus. I mean, even that. You can have the 4-year sequence in music and still not be able to fit band and chorus and the 4 years of language that they want. So every child has to make those decisions about choosing which ones they want to do. And I want to keep that experience open for kids. And I really understand that frustration of a child who wants to do band and wants to do this sequence and pathway and do all the robotics courses they can imagine, you know. And I really like having some of these newer areas be able to be, I don't know what the right word is, swapped out for a core or counted as core so that the core sequence can be covered. But we also have all those requirements from the state. And I mean, I think the problems that Mrs. Monaco was talking about before have to do with the state requirements. They require these things. And so if a kid who isn't very interested in history didn't have to take 2 years of US history, they could take a different elective, or they could, what about the kids who want to do music and art and language, you know, and
Get rid of history.
So, well, I was a history teacher, so I'm not going to suggest that. But, so I just want us to keep, you know, each time this new programs come in, I think they're great, and I'm not against them. But I also want us to keep in mind the whole child and that opportunity for kids in high school to not have to decide what they're going to be for the rest of their lives, because they may find something they didn't even know about. So I just feel like with this conversation that I wanted to add that to the conversation. So thank you.
I was just going to add real quick, again, this is kind of a working process, and maybe we have to rethink the wordage, but we're not saying a student would be locked into a particular pathway.
Right.
It's more about awareness, you know, what will taking certain classes lead me to down the road. So we want them to be aware what kind of careers are out there. And a lot of students don't really know or understand that at this point. So it's also part of an awareness thing. I think we owe it to the, you know, high school students to kind of have an idea of, you know, what's out there for possible majors or careers. So that's kind of the driving force. It's not to lock kids into a specific pathway.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost, again, it is a working draft, so it's not going to be included for next year, but it's in some ways informational too, because on the previous slide, you'll see that there'll be science and engineering, environmental and life sciences, healthcare, social services, business, fine arts, different media. So it'll be a variety of different pathways. It's more of a informational basis for a lot of kids. Some kids may choose to go on the pathways and then come off of them. So I don't think our intention is to ever lock anybody in and not give students flexibility to take things that are of interest to them. So it's good feedback. Was there any more questions on the?
No, I could, again, you want to get out of here before 11, right? So,
well, that would be preferable, yes, but we're happy to stay as long as you like.
I know.
I have a few more questions, but they go back to the beginning of your presentation. So I thought maybe when you finished it, I'd ask them.
Yep.
Yeah, so, you know, as you're probably aware, we have a growing ESL population, and we've incorporated classes since the beginning of last year at the high school. We have specific subject area courses for students that don't speak English as a first language. So it's really allowed for those teachers to give some individualized attention to these students in those academic areas. In addition to those core academic areas that ELL has offered, and I know the acronyms are changing, so I don't know if it's EL, ESL, but essentially it's students that English is not their first language. So in addition to those core academics, we kind of expanded in our regular ESL course. We have an ESL 1 and ESL 2 course. So these courses would be different courses from the core academics, and this course at the high school is a course where students, again, learn everyday English skills, learn how to navigate just kind of in the school, in the world around them. A lot of them are new to the country, so that course really allows them to really have the ability to have a better understanding, you know, of American culture and the school system. And so those two courses have been, we didn't include the descriptions, but the descriptions have been kind of revamped. And in the past, just so you know, we only had one ESL course, so now we have a 1 and a 2. So we're really tracking the WIDA scores, which are the scores that are provided to our ELL instructor on students' English speaking ability. So he's using that data now to help place students in ESL 1 or 2.
And again, I think Patrick and Carrie Lamprey's done a great deal of work working with you guys too, so I think that's important. And talking about ELL kids, L kids, ESL kids, whatever acronym that you want to use, they're a very diverse group. So I just think that's important to know. They're not a monolithic group at all. We're not talking about those students who arrive at 3 or 4 years old, go through the elementary school, middle school, and come to high school who are pretty, you know, very proficient in 2 languages. We're starting to see students now show up as 9th graders with no English skills. So how do you allow that student to access any part of a high school day when, again, it's difficult enough to navigate even if you're sort of a native speaker. And so I think that's why we're seeing the expansion there. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the high school staff and Mark's been really flexible about addressing these kids, you know, in a timely manner, because as you said, they come in with no English, and you know, there are districts where they deal with these types of kids all the time, and we have small groups coming in at different times, and they're making sure that these kids are getting what they need, so thank you.
Great, so the next is Burlington High School, a seal of biliteracy addition to the program, or it's a voluntary option that students will have. Renee Dacey, the World Language Department Head, She's worked on this proposal for a couple of years. You know, she's tweaked it quite a bit. As you know, the World Language does a great job with their programs and curriculum, so I think this will be a nice additional benefit for students who choose to participate in it. The World Language in the English Language Learning Program is joining a number of schools, hopefully, that celebrate the success in language studies in honoring students with this seal of biliteracy. It recognizes and rewards English language learners, dual language program students, and world language program students for biliteracy that they demonstrate in speaking, writing, reading, and listening. The seal is voluntary for students within those districts to participate. And the English language learners who maintain their native language are honored for the linguistic resources they bring to their schooling. Additionally, the World Language Program that set proficiency targets can demonstrate to students that the longer sequences of language study lead to higher proficiencies, and overall the benefits of rewarding qualified students with this seal will impact their college and career readiness, because biliteracy is a skill that will enhance most career and college opportunities. There are 2 seals that students could achieve: platinum, that score an average of advanced low on 2 proficiency tests, and they earn a rating of advanced on the ELA, MCAS, or Access test, or a gold seal for a score of intermediate, high on the proficiency tests, and a rating of proficient or advanced on the MCAS or Access tests. So I think this will be a really nice feature for students to be able to access and to earn as they navigate our typical programs at the high school.
Again, this is a state program. It was strongly supported by the new commissioner who came from Lawrence, and it's really to certainly learning English is an important skill for students to have, but it's also valuing their native languages that they speak and encouraging them to do so. So again, there are many second-generation folks like myself who were discouraged from keeping the language that we had, and I think this is the state's effort to say, no, being bilingual or trilingual is important. One of the limiting factors that we're going to have in Burlington that we have to solve, which Renee is aware of, and we may seek community support, is unlike many districts where we don't have 80% of our students, for instance, speaking Spanish or Portuguese, where the state has assessments established. So if you look at some of our more prevalent languages like Gujarati, there's no assessment, so they would rely, I believe they're going to rely on native speakers to help evaluate the student proficiency. So we may be reaching out to community members to help us accomplish that.
Great. And then we'd like to always just end on just giving some updates from some of the new courses that were put in last year. Obviously, the foundations courses are, again, for students on special education plans. Those numbers would be low. And you can see some of the different mathematics classes. The AP Human Geography, obviously, as an outlier, would be one of the lower classes because it's an advanced placement course, but all the new classes from last year are pretty well, have pretty good enrollment and have been pretty well received from the students this previous year.
Okay. Mrs. Monaco?
Okay. So I'm going to try and make most of it a comment so that you don't have to answer a lot of questions.
Okay.
First of all, I wanted to say I have no problem with the pathways. The music conflict already exists, and the pathways don't. So I was just thinking where it exists, maybe some thought could go into room in the pathways. But anyway, the emergency medicine, you had last year the CP level.
Correct.
And you're going to
add an honors.
Okay.
Yep.
The business development class, there are no prerequisites?
For that particular one, I'd have to check. I don't believe so, no.
Which business, you talking of?
The new course, or?
The new course.
Merchandising or the?
Yeah, I thought it was called business development.
Fashion, marketing, and retail, or?
Yeah, that one.
I don't believe there are any prerequisites. No, there are no prerequisites. If you look at the top left, there's no prerequisites.
Okay, and the only other thing I wondered, if I'm reading it correctly, it looks like the string music would be offered at 2 levels,
Correct.
CP and honors, so what would be the difference? How would you,
We ask the teachers when they, have honors versus CP, if you read the description, in your program of studies,
one would be just a
I think the
more
biggest piece
thorough,
is,
advanced,
I think the biggest
higher
piece is
level?
they complete a guided research project in the honors level class.
Okay.
I believe that's the biggest differentiation between the two.
Because obviously there has to be a difference, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's it. So the guided research project pertaining to the curriculum would be the honors level addendum.
Okay, great, that's all I've got. Good job, I like your new courses. I think the course offerings at the high school are awesome. I just wish that
Just can't take them all.
Yeah, seriously, I wish
Right.
they could have, they had
Right.
the option of taking a class after school or taking a, I don't know how to fit in more, but it's like the middle school kids we were talking to earlier, they want more.
Right.
And, I jokingly said, get rid of history, because, that wasn't my strong suit, but, it's frustrating that there are so many requirements, and, so you have to take these courses that you don't really want to take, and yet the ones that you're dying to take, you can't get at them, so just expressing frustration. Thank you, though, great job.
Thank you.
Ms. Simon?
Yeah, I think it's, all the changes sound really good. I did notice a couple of courses that are maybe a little more interdisciplinary, and I like that, because that also helps kids expand, like the science and society, was that what, it helps kids who are really focused on a science, really want to do STEM stuff, but then it helps them think about policy issues that scientists have to deal with, and how does it affect our society, and how does it link into this new civics requirement. And so I'm very excited whenever I see any of those kind of interdisciplinary courses. And I also, I don't know if you remember, after the school committee conference this year, I had reported back about the biliteracy, and I didn't realize that Ms. Dacey had already been researching it and stuff. So I am just delighted that it's in the book for next year.
Great.
And that our students will have the opportunity to do that, and to recognize both for a native language, a non-English native language speaker, to recognize the value of that language while they're also fluent and proficient in English, and also for kids like my kids who grew up speaking English in an English-speaking family, but the incentive to be proficient in another language. And both of my daughters going through Burlington High School were able to develop proficiency, but this gives an additional, and I'm excited to encourage any student to become bilingual out of our district. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a couple of brief comments. I know it's getting late. Every year when we look at these course offerings, I'm always so impressed with the level of attention that's paid to upgrades and offering students, the best possible array of courses that you can within the constraints of the budget. And I think it reflects a real recognition by the administration of what's in the best interests of the students. So I just want you to keep up the good work. I agree with everything that's been said about the pathways. I think it's a good guide for students, and I like what Mr. Sullivan said, that they're not going to be tied into a certain pathway. If they start on a pathway, they don't like it, they can move on to another pathway. I know that some colleges, and Mrs. Simons alluded to this, Ms. Simons, some colleges don't allow you to select a major until you've completed 2 years, because they want you to get an array of offerings, and you might change your mind as to what you think you want to major in. But I think it's good that we have them, because there's so many courses that are out there, and it's nice for parents and students to have some guidance and some expertise in the area of what would be a good sequence of courses to look at. So I commend you. I think it's good work, and as always, it's good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just add my 2 cents. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think it's an interesting discussion that we have every year, and it's the old liberal arts versus, you know, technical instruction. And I think as college and education gets more expensive, there seems to be a swing of the pendulum towards find something and just do it, and then get out and start earning some money to pay off your loans. I think, like Martha, I'm more of a liberal arts person. That was my experience, and I just think it gives you more well-rounded education, but a lot of people will feel it's not practical nowadays. So it's an interesting dilemma, and it's getting more difficult to deal with, not less difficult. So I sympathize with you trying to keep everyone happy in this type of a situation, especially in a public school situation where you've got X amount of time to give these classes. You can't go at night school, or you can't go on the weekends, or things of that nature. So it's a difficult dilemma, and it's an interesting discussion to have every year. And I think you're doing a good job of trying to balance it as best you can. There's never going to be a situation that makes everybody happy. There's just too much stuff. But so keep up the good work. It's a great program of studies, and to me, the best part about it is we have this discussion every year, and you tweak it every year, and you improve it every year, and if something's not working, you go this way instead of that way. So that's, to me, that's the important thing, and you guys do that every year, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, there's just one thing that we didn't touch upon, the VHS, the virtual high school classes. How do those, if they do at all, help with adding an extra class in that you might not be able to fit? I know you can't do that for band, obviously, but.
It still would take a schedule slot, so we use the virtual high school
does,
almost
okay.
as a, to amplify the program. So if a student wanted to take something that they either couldn't fit in because of a schedule conflict, so say a course ran concurrently with another class, they wanted to take it through VHS, or if they didn't offer it, or we didn't offer it in the program. You know, we've had students take Irish poetry and other classes that we just wouldn't have the numbers to run. They've taken as interest-based. They've been able to take them as an elective. So it's an affiliation fee that we pay for virtual high school. It's more of an addendum to the program, not necessarily, it's actually more of a design to avoid conflicts than to create them. Yeah, so it's actually, it's used when there are conflicts in place to alleviate that conflict, to give students flexibility.
Was that Irish history?
A student took Irish poetry, yeah.
Wow.
Not history, poetry.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You don't have an Italian poetry, do you?
I think they do, you might just not want to hear it, though, I don't know.
Put that in the program.
Interesting.
I'm reciting some right now. I just wanted to, again, I guess the way I think about the pathways is there's an incredible amount of curricular inertia that exists, and it's been around for decades. And I could probably come, again, very closely to identifying each of your high school pathways and courses that you experienced. So what I like about the pathways is it forces students and families just maybe to take a multiple year look, to take a 3 or 4 year look at the courses they're going to take. Doesn't mean they're locked into it, but I think that multiple year look, Joe, and I know you encourage the counselors to have that conversation with students about having a sort of a 2, 3, 4 year plan, because if they're just deciding year to year, that inertia sort of takes over and you're kind of locked in. So I, in some ways, think the pathways actually would allow for more exploration than potentially less. And even at the middle school, I think those conversations have to be multiple year, because if you even think about a kid who's considering Shaw Sheen, a decision that they make in 6 or 7, or a behavioral decision that they make may impact an opportunity that they have in 8th grade. So just having them think in sort of that multiple year way, I think, maybe helps. Again, I think it's agreeing with Mr. Murphy on this particular thing. I think that the conversations are as important as the outcome, and I think your department chairs do a great job. I think really making sure their courses stay relevant, and I think the marketplace of student choice helps with that as well. So I think that's important. We're at a very interesting time with high school, and in that the K through 8, 3 through 8, the sort of the state assessment realm has been changed through 8th grade. The high school has been locked in legacy mode, and they're going to be moving out of legacy mode right into the new MCAS. And that means new cut scores, that means new decisions that are going to need to be made. And I think the state board is really struggling with that because they don't want to see graduation rates drop, because that's a political problem. And I also think that they're adding, again, a civics requirement. Science is an interesting problem too, because students are required, Joe, they have to pass an English and math state exam, MCAS. They need to pass a science MCAS as well, and the state had offered 4, correct? Engineering, chemistry, physics, and biology. There weren't enough students taking the engineering and the chemistry, so the state can't afford, they're talking about not being able to afford those assessments. So they're really looking at limiting the science experience or the science graduation requirement to biology and potentially a physical science test. So I think in a lot of ways, they're going to be shaping high school curriculum the wrong way, which is really why we want to say we want some more flexibility. Patrick, I know you have kids in New Hampshire where the state applied for a waiver from the new federal law, and New Hampshire now has some, they aren't using the SAT, so they're using some flexibility as well. So I think the state's in an interesting dilemma. We lead the nation in certain measurable metrics, and it almost would be better if we weren't, because I think it's easier to change when you're not, and we're looking for more flexibility. And Mrs. Monaco, it does get to your original point, is if we are so structured and so dictated in terms of what kids have to do in order to earn a high school diploma, we certainly don't want to make decisions that sort of get in the way. But if we're funneling, if the state is funneling all kids through a biology test, for instance, in order to earn a high school diploma, then that's obviously not going to be a course that we can avoid. If they're requiring a civics course or a civics activity, we can't eliminate social studies. So I'm saying, and not that we would want to, but I'm just saying if there's, we're at an interesting time, and I just think that we're seeking more flexibility in high school as opposed to less. And if those conversations come up, or if you become a part of it, I think it would be something to think about, because by the time you complete Mass Core, there's not a whole lot of time left to do any exploration or any electives when you think about it. So again, Joe, thank you very much. Mark, thank you. Your department chairs, again, did a great job again. And people want to make comments, how should they go about doing that? Directly to...
Can they call you directly? Or?
They can call me directly. Absolutely. They're always welcome to call me, but
they can reach out to either Joe or myself at the high school directly, yep.
Okay, and they can go from there.
And
So.
I just want to add that the pathways, I saw business and finance, for example. My son was interested in business freshman year, took a class, oh, I like this, now what? And, having that just on a sheet, because then he went back and forth, oh, that's offered at 11th, oh, that's offered at and it was difficult to navigate. So more so just, oh, I like that, now what type of thing. And seeing how much extracurricular, not extracurricular, what's the extra?
Elective?
Elective, thank you. The electives that are in there is amazing. You can do oceanography or you can do pottery. I mean, it just runs the gamut. And a lot of times with my child going through high school, that was the dilemma of which way to go there. So I really feel like even though we're bringing through the pathways, I'm not that concerned, because I think for some people it's, oh, I like this, what next? And it takes out a lot of what we were doing of trying to go back and forth and find what is next easier, and then look through. I just went through the college cycle, and a number of friends in other towns with children at the same age, and I was shocked how many of them were not given what I consider a basic offering of, for example, in English honors. Whether it was numbers, whether it was a teacher issue, whatever it was, that is really never been a question here of if that will be provided from year to year. So again, that's another area that I know you work so diligently to make sure that just CPU, the honors, all those options are there for every student that needs them, and they are not pigeonholed into taking, you know, a CPU class. I think I'm saying that right. CP class, you know, because the honors class isn't existing there. So I appreciate that, and really just the dual pathways, you know, that allows those students, as you said, going in freshman year, that they have a breather. They have even one class that they can take a breather or say, hey, let me try something and see if I like it before we invest all that money for me to then go down that path. So there are so many things in this program of study that really just make Burlington, again, high school, a great place to experience high school and have so many choices. So I want to thank you, because each year, as Tom said, you come back with new ideas. The teachers have worked hard listening to the children and what they're interested and passionate too. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And credit, as always, should go to the teachers and the leadership team at the high school. We get to take the credit publicly, but they do all the hard work, and they really deserve the accolades because they're the ones that are in the trenches every day with the kids. So they really deserve all the credit.
Thank you. Would we like to school choice while they're here? Or?
While we're here, so
Okay.
Sharon, what do we have to do?
Okay. Is there a
Make
motion to open?
make a motion to open the public hearing for school choice, school year 2019-20.
Second.
All right, it's been motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we
Aye.
vote?
Aye.
All right, so the public hearing is open for the 2018-2019 school choice.
1920.
1920,
Oh,
sorry.
oh my,
it's the
I
typo.
can't get over the 2020 for some reason. It's just, anyway.
It's coming no matter what.
So, Mark, again,
Yes.
you're assuming you want to replicate what we have been doing, which would be
10-5-5-5.
10-5-5-5, so 10 spots for freshmen, 5 sophomore, 5 juniors, 5 seniors. It just gives us some flexibility. The state is talking about changing the reimbursement formula, but again, that's the state call, state conversation. We use it for students. Families are much more mobile. A lot of times, students in their last couple of years will want to just stay and finish out high school. It just, again, gives us some flexibility, and I think you've managed the program really well. So I would support continuing with our limited school choice program of 10 spots for freshmen, 5 for sophomores, 5 for juniors, 5 for seniors. And again, please know that if we take all 10, for instance, use all 10 spots for freshmen, we are obligated to see those students through graduation. So it's not an annual appointment. They, once they're in Burlington, they're a Burlington student through graduation.
Comments? Is there anyone? Yep, Mr. Murphy?
We've been doing this now for 4, 5, 6 years, I guess.
More than that, I think,
More
yeah.
than that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think 10.
Yeah.
Seems to be working well, and
Eric started it.
right. No, it seems to be working well, and if you guys are satisfied with it, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah, no, I think the program has been, it's been nice for the high school. So like Dr. Conti mentioned, I think we see a lot of our initial applications at the freshman year, at the 9th grade level. In most of the applications we've seen historically, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade have been existing Burlington students who have come up through the system, and for a variety of circumstances, the families have had to move out of town. So it gives the flexibility for the kids to stay, but also offers some reimbursements for us, which is a nice feature to have.
So I'm in favor.
Ms. Monaco?
I just wanted to say quickly that I remember before Dr. Conti came on the scene here, every year we had this discussion about how we didn't want to do school choice and we'd vote against it, and how refreshing it was to make that change and jump into what I think was somewhat progressive and worked out very well. So I'm in favor of it.
Ms. Simon?
Yeah, I think that the limited nature of this and is allowing for some individualization for addressing individual student needs. as a concept, I'm not much in favor of the school choice program the way it's set up in Massachusetts. I think it's really damaging to some school districts, but I think that the way it's been done since I've been aware of it has been beneficial to the students and to our school district. Again, that doesn't say how it impacts the school districts that the students might have otherwise gone to, but it does allow some of that individualization. I do support this program, this limited program.
And so everybody's aware too, we, particularly with the freshman slots, we don't accept or review any applications until we're certain that we can accommodate all of our own Burlington students through the scheduling process. So typically the spring, this coming spring, once we have a pretty good idea of what our numbers look like, we'll then consider all the applications at that time. So we don't negatively impact class size for current Burlington students.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak during the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. So public hearing has been closed. Is there a vote to approve school choice?
I move, Madam Chairman, that we approve the limited school choice as submitted in our backup materials.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, passes 5-0-0 for school choice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
Yeah, no, Mark, we'll leave it to the end, but we have a teacher sabbatical leave. It's a high school teacher. You and I talked. You're
Yes.
in support of
I am in
her
support of it,
sabbatical.
yes.
So I
Yep.
just wanted them to hear from you directly. We'll get to it later in the agenda, so thanks.
Would you like me to stay?
No.
Thank you very much.
You sure you don't want to take it to kindergarten discussion?
I'm sure.
Oh,
I appreciate the opportunity.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
you too. Okay, so we'll go back up to transportation communication?
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to
Okay.
turn over to Bob. And,
Thanks. So first, thank you, and I'd like to apologize for my scratchy voice. Just came on late in the day and trying to deal with it, so again, sorry for that. So as most of you know, people watching at home, our bus contract, which we've had in place for 4.5 years, is expiring in June of this year. So it gives us a little bit less than 6 months, just to make sure that we can get that in place. Given the magnitude of the contract, I believe it's a value to bring somebody else in that has some expertise. You know, again, Nicole and myself are familiar with the bidding process and what it takes. But when we've met with a particular vendor, this particular person actually has over 35 years' experience and has a business with other partners that combined have additional 30 and 25 years of experience as well, too. And the focus of this particular consultant is specialized transportation, organization, and efficiency. So myself and Patrick met with this particular vendor the other day, and like I said, you know, not only the 30 years experience in the company, the references that they bring are over 100 districts in New England that they've worked with in the past, and there's a lot of repeat customers as well too. And they also work with vendors, districts throughout, like I said, not only New England states, but New York and a few other states moving out west as well too. So in particular, what we'd be looking for is not for them to do the work for us, but provide assistance to what it is that we have in place and what we're looking for. In particular would be to review and analyze the current contract that we have and see if there's any downfalls or efficiencies in there. You know, it would identify the current transportation and transportation routes to see if there's improved efficiencies there. It would review the district requirements for the bid process. It would identify some possible cost savings. And a lot of this would happen not only with just the expertise of the company that would be providing this if we choose to go with them. They also use a particular bus software called Versatran, which again has been around for more than 30 years, but it's kind of one of the industry leaders, you know, some may say, when it comes to providing transportation efficiency for buses and so forth. There's a whole other list of situations that this company can provide for us, but similar to when we do our taxes at the end of the year as individuals, even if we have an outside company do them for us or prepare our taxes, we're the ones ultimately that are responsible for it. So anything related to bid documents and so forth, nothing gets submitted or actually passed on or out to bid or anything until it's been reviewed by us. So not only do they review our existing contract, then they'd come up with some questions and so forth and meet with our team. Then they'd prepare some documents, and we would all have input in that before we'd move to the next step. So like I said, I mean, it's a big magnitude of a project, and obviously it has a high dollar value. I think the minimal amount of money that a company charges for the expertise that they bring, and I'll get to the dollar value in a second, I personally think it's a good value. So I just wanted to start that conversation and, you know, take some questions and so forth. Thanks.
And again, I think it's no surprise, we've talked about it. It was at the guideline meeting where it was requested, we're going to look at the increase in transportation a little bit separately because our transportation contract is up. It's about $1.5 million annual endeavor. And I think we were charged by one of the selectmen to see if there's anything that we can do creatively or rethink something. And honestly, I don't think, I'm not seeking your permission. I guess I'm asking informing you that we are bringing on a transportation consultant, and we're working with them closely, and we're going to really see if there's something that we're missing, and try to fulfill the request to get as creative as we can. It might be connected to some of the building conversations we're having, because if we need to add we have 3 tiers of bus service. If we have to add a 4th tier, it might be some models that this person can help us run to figure out the cost. So I just think it's something that I haven't utilized in the past, but I think this year in particular, it maybe, I think it is definitely a resource that we need. And please, this does not mean we're at all displeased with our current transportation vendor, who's been in Burlington for at least my 10 years, and Sharon, I think probably well beyond that. So again, I think, again, they've done a great job. So this is not saying that they're not doing a great job. This is just honestly looking at the routes, the systems, sort of the overall picture. And I think that his experience might even ask some questions or challenge some of our thinking in terms of transportation. So that's where we are. Did you mention the cost of the contract? Oh, you did not. Okay, so it's, did you, go ahead. I don't want to steal your thunder and then get questions.
No thunder. So there's an hourly rate, and we're billed per individual hour, not per day, and it's a not to exceed $5,000. So, I mean, if we don't spend the $5,000, we're not charged that, which is good. We will be in charge, incurring transportation costs to and from him to get here, if we are to go with this person or with a particular company.
He's not coming from Hawaii.
Mr. Nelson?
I think it's a good idea. I think if Bob said $50,000, I don't know if I'd be in favor of it, but I think that's short money to get another person to take a look at the way we put it out to bid, whether there are better ways to do it. Is he going to look at special education, transportation as well? I mean, there are big questions, I think, in everyone's mind about value and whether we can get a better, maybe, I don't know if it's going to be a better cost, a more efficient way of doing it. I think we share some of those transportation expenses right now with other communities, but I think it's money well spent. So.
Yeah, and I think some of the principles or the guiding principles that this committee that have been in place in this community for a long period of time have a financial impact. And I'm not saying they're the wrong values or the wrong decisions, but I also think that there's a cost, for doing it. So Patrick, you and I talked about an example. Ashland made the choice when they changed their schedules. Would you tell me they
combined the middle and high school kids on the same bus.
So, and I know that.
Not a lot of high school kids take the bus to begin with, and obviously I'm not saying we're going to do that, but again, creative, something that we never would have thought of.
Yeah. But I'm saying that if people are saying, oh no, they can't be on the bus together, which is, again, that's a fine value. I'm not questioning that value, but then understand that has a impact on the number of buses, the number of runs, and the cost of transportation.
Yeah.
So that's all we're
Just
saying.
a quick follow-up, Madam Chair. I think that it's good to know what the options are and to know what the cost is for each one of those options. I don't think that making change just for the sake of change, or because someone says, you know, there's a cheaper way to do it, is necessarily the way this committee would want to go. I mean, some people would say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't hear a lot of complaints. I don't know if my colleagues do about the bus system in Burlington. I think most people like it. But if there's a more efficient way to provide the service, I think we have an obligation to at least explore it. So,
Mrs.
Thank you.
Marco? So you're proposing this particular contractor?
I think it's well past proposal, Mrs. Monaco. So I'm informing the committee that we've brought on a transportation consultant. That transportation consultant is going to be, again, writing the RFP, looking at some creative options, answering some questions for us. And I really felt obligated to do so, given all else that we're trying to do now, and especially since the conversation at the guideline conversation and our conversations about looking at transportation a little bit separately. So we really wanted to bring someone who had an expertise in that area.
It will not exceed $5,000?
That is,
That plus transportation. And again, the person is local inside the state, so if he has to drive 20 miles there, 50 cents a mile, which is part of the contract.
So where are we getting the money? I know it isn't a ton of money, but it's still money, and it all adds up. So where's it coming from?
I think it's coming out of school choice is where it's coming out of right now. Is that? Yeah, so again, we haven't decided yet, but it'll probably come out of one of those accounts, either international students or school choice.
Have we frozen the budget yet?
No.
Are we going to?
We can decide, we'll see after we get this month's financial statement.
That's the next meeting?
Yes.
22nd.
2 weeks.
So I agree with a lot of what Steve mentioned. I don't see that there's necessarily a reason to make changes, but I think that to have the information is always a good thing, and then make a decision based on the information that you get. But I'm not going into this transportation consultant determined that we're going to make changes unless it's the right thing to do for our kids.
I agree 100%.
I know you do.
I'm good with it. The subject did come up at the guideline meeting back before Christmas, and that was one area that we were asked to take a look at, and so I think it's for what, in a $1.5 million bus contract, a $5,000 investment to try to see if we can do it more efficiently, or do it better, or do it in a way that will save the time some money and not restrict services, I think is worth money well spent.
Please make sure it gets on the list of unbudgeted items that we have running.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think it's a really good use of $5,000. I mean, you have an idea of where the money's going to come from. But I also think that, you know, we've got new personnel, we've got a new contract coming up. It's a perfect opportunity to look at all of our options, to look at efficiencies that might save us money, to look at ideas that maybe haven't been thought of where we have new people here. And I think it's a really good idea to be doing that. It doesn't mean you're going to, and obviously you're not going to make changes unless they're good changes. So, and they match the values that we've been proponents of. So I think it's a good plan. And thank you for letting us know about it.
So they'll run through, but will we still see or be made aware of the RFP before it goes out based on those changes? Or how will the next part work? Will you present to us the different options?
Yeah, we're not going to, for instance, say we're going to put middle school students with high school students without your approval. So I just think we'll probably put together a presentation.
Okay.
And have him come to a meeting and talk to you about what he's looked at and what he's explored and some options. And you might say, could you go back and look at, again, I think it's going to be a conversation, and then we'll look at some of the financial impact. Timing, Bob, is going to be obviously in time for the budget, right? So, because we need to get bids out
Right.
and get get responses in. So
Right.
that's the timeline isn't, might seem like a long time, but we're in a pretty tight timeline.
Mr. Murphy?
Although, just to follow up on that comment, there is an understanding in terms of our guidelines in our overall budget that depending on whatever increase we might wind up with in the transportation budget will be taken outside of the stated guidelines, I believe.
Yes, but I still think that was the conversation, and I think then our commitment was to really look at it carefully and to try to be as creative as we can. So I think we're trying to fulfill our commitment, and then I don't even, we won't have any idea of the cost until the RFP is written and until we get bids back.
Right, which won't be probably till after we've gone through much of our budget conversations.
Right. So we'll certainly put in at least what we have now with some sort of escalator. I'm assuming we can estimate something, but it won't be a firm number until we get the bids back.
Right, but I just kind of wanted to reemphasize for the record that the increase in the transportation budget, the understanding with the guideline committee was that increase would be taken out of the budget guideline, in addition to.
And then just one more thing, I don't know if this gets written into a contract or not, but if he might or she be able to answer, I am stunned at watching another district's middle school buses show up and sit right now in the dark for 10 minutes before they're allowed off the bus into the school, waiting for the school to open. And then I was talking to a parent from 2 other towns who that is the same case for their middle school, the first school opening. So I'm not sure if that's an RFP thing or how that's happening in other districts, because I know for sure it's not happening here. So if when he presents, if he would be able to answer that, I guess for me personally, as a heads up. Sure. Because I like the way that is. So.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions or things you want explored, just email to Bob.
Okay.
That'd be great. So we
All
can
right.
certainly
That might
incorporate
help.
that in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Kristen?
Yes. Ms. Malco.
I think, do we still have our standing committee on transportation? You and I have been on it for years.
Yeah.
So if you have a way to include us in any of it, we are a named committee,
That'd be great.
subcommittee.
All right. Thank you for looking into that, because we have huge projects coming online that might be impacting Cambridge Street soon, so thank you. Okay, I think we're at school, oh, is there any old business?
Is it policy?
Yes. So if there's no old business, then we'll go down to new business, the attendance age policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I put this under new business because we briefly discussed it in the fall. This says a second reading, but I would just, with the committee's permission, really not consider this a second reading at this time. I just would almost like to restart the conversation, but it's more timely at this time. We were running into some issues with a sort of an 8-week window where we were trying to evaluate students who were turning 5 after August 31st, and it was causing some conflict. And so when I called around to my colleagues, there are policies that are sort of all over the place, but in my conversations with my colleagues, and I think Arlington was the best example, they were moving away from the individual testing of students, and part of that was not necessarily for academic readiness. There are many students who can present academically, but they really felt for the social emotional wellness of the child that that additional year, and I do think it's borne out in research, And there's always exceptions, because I hate saying that, because someone's going to tell me their kid was 3 and ready for kindergarten and is now owns, you know, their own island, and I'm going to say, that's great. I'm sort of thinking in generalities that, again, the research bears out that there's sort of an academic part of the equation. There's also a social emotional part of the equation. So I like what Arlington did in terms of they made a hard September 1st cutoff date. We have to have a cutoff date at some point, just so we can predict the number of kids that we have. Is August 31st better than September 1st, better than August 29th? The answer to that is no. The gray area, Patrick, the sort of the 2-month window afterwards was forcing us to evaluate students, evaluate programs the students were having, and I think it was putting the district in a bit of a bind. And so the tendency, again, with my colleagues and some of the districts around, is to just pick a day. And so we were picking September 1st and really trying to look at that Arlington policy. That's the intention behind this. I know there's going to be lots of opinions on sort of a lot of other sides, but I wanted to make sure the intentions were clear. It's to try to give the kids the best chance of success. And again, we have very good readers in kindergarten. We have students who are pre-readers. Everyone's accepted. Our program, I think, meets the needs of all kids. And I think we do a very good job making sure the experience is developmentally appropriate while also meeting the current state standards, which are very, I'm going to say rigorous, but in the K kind of way. So if that makes sense. So I'm not sure if there's a better elementary way to say that. So anyway, so that's the policy and the intention behind the policy. Do you want to add anything, Patrick?
So you're suggesting we take it as a first reading tonight?
I'm suggesting you take it as a
Okay.
first reading tonight, and then, because I'm sure there'll be feedback, I'm sure you'll hear, this is going to impact families. We have our kindergarten open intro night coming up next week, so I think that it's a challenging time, because especially when there's a late summer or early fall child, you know, there's a lot of decisions that folks have to make, and the pendulum swings back and forth. There were a lot of years when parents actually want their kids to start later, so they would hold them back. And now we're seeing the pendulum where a lot of parents are pushing them into school. And so, again, that's all.
So if we're not voting this tonight, sorry, what will we be presenting to the kindergarten families next week? I just want to be clear, so that night people are aware of whether they can, whether they should be there, I guess.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, what I'll probably say is we have a policy that's pending that we're in discussions with, and it's again, when I'm saying we don't have 400 kids born in that window. We typically have a handful, and there may be some handful of parents there, and they're usually very cooperative conversations where parents are asking our opinion. They're usually asking lots of opinions around. They might even want to come in and see the program, talk to teachers. There's a lot of conversation happening, especially if it's a first child, about sort of when to start. And so I just think it's the gray area is causing more problems now than I think it was designed to do. And I think just having a hard date eliminates some of that and doesn't force us to be evaluating students at 4 years old, which I think is a challenge. They change a tremendous amount, even over the summer. And then we're not only evaluating the child, we have to evaluate the experience that the child has had, the preschool experience the child has had or is having. And again, I'm not responsible for that program. I'm not saying I can't evaluate it, but it's not I haven't spent a lot of time understanding that, and obviously the parents value that experience because more than likely they've paid for it. So it's just one of those things that I think is set up to cause some problems, and my colleagues, again, especially Kathy in Arlington, has decided that the way out is just to pick a day.
Ms. Simon?
I'd like to know what the advantage of not voting on it tonight is, because I've had a chance to talk about it, and other people, if the rest of the committee feels they need more time, that's fine. But, you know, if that's true, but I'm not sure what the advantage of waiting is in your perspective.
I think my opinion was I didn't do a very good job presenting it earlier in the year when we were presenting it, and we said we would sort of put it off. And so I didn't want that, I would almost say cursory conversation to be considered a first reading. I think some people might find that unfair. So I wanted to spend some time with it. And then I do think it's an important policy. You know, whatever the committee decides is okay. I'm just telling you that you're going to be getting calls and weighing in and trying to make these determinations. And it's just, no one wants to tell a parent no, especially their first experience with the school district. We have hopefully 13 more years of partnership to make, and I'm just saying it's a, we're pretending there's a lot of sort of precision in these decisions, and I'm saying there's really not.
Madam Chair? I have a point of order. It's on our agenda this evening as a second reading, and I'm hearing from the superintendent that he wants to treat it as a first reading. So I would make a motion that we continue the hearing on this, or the discussion on this policy until our first meeting in March, to give anyone who wants to give their feedback. Yeah, well, Dr. Conti said he wants to give people an opportunity to weigh in on it. You're going to give them 2 weeks to weigh in? That's my point.
Well, it could be February.
Again, I think if we're going to wait till March, then
It's too late for the policy.
we may need to then delay the implementation. Again, so that's.
Go with February.
So that's.
All right, we'll
So,
do
I
our
mean,
first meeting in February. That would be my motion.
So I think
Give
that's.
them a month. That we continue the vote on the school attendance age policy until our first meeting in February.
Second.
So it's been motioned and approved. Discussion. Ms. Malcolm?
I just have 2 quick points I would like to make on the policy itself, not on the postponing it. I think we should postpone it. But Eric, I think you need to leave yourself wiggle room in two places. One is there's always the very, very rare exception that you might feel you want to make in the kindergarten situation. And the other exception is further down in the policy when you mention kids transferring in at different grades. And the way this reads, it's only from other public districts that they can go, they can go in a 3rd grade if they went to 2nd grade in another public district. But personally, I think there are some schools that are not public schools that should, that may,
Okay.
you should be able to treat them the same way. Don't limit yourself to public schools in a policy when, there could be kids from private schools that are just as well off, and you don't want to take a year away from them.
No, right, and again, the language I have to make sure is correct, because I can tell you the intention. With the tech companies around, we have a lot of families who come in for 2 or 3 years and then leave. From other countries. So oftentimes the grades don't match up. We actually recently had a family from Australia who's coming in, and not only don't the grades match up that much, but their entire calendar is different from us. So what?
It's upside down.
It's upside down, right? So their child is sort of finishing a grade in January, and their summer is at that. So I think we were just trying to create some structure. We were making exceptions, but Ms. Monica, I guess I agree with you. We probably need to have some wiggle room. It wasn't meant to exclude private schools in that setting. It was just meant to.
I can understand a different country.
Yes.
And you're going to have to figure that out and evaluate it. But as far as just transferring within this country from another state or another community, if it's a private school, you see the problem.
Yep, I do. So we'll look at that. And then you'd like to sort of maintain some exception.
I don't like the exception that if your child was born between September 1st and October, whatever, that I think that's way too broad, because like you said, we should have a cutoff date. But in the unusual situation where the child was born September 2nd or the 5th, and they've been through 3 years of preschool and they're doing great. I mean, you should be able to make a judgment on that if you so choose.
Okay.
Mr. Murphy?
Playing devil's advocate, however, I think one of the reasons of doing this is to take those, because whatever date you pick, whatever criteria you pick, whatever unusual circumstance you pick, there's gonna be somebody that's just a shade beyond that who wants benefit of the same doubt or the same allowance.
Yep.
And I think if I were the person making the decision, I would rather have it a black and white, and then it's gonna save a lot of discussions about whether this 5-year-old and a 4-year-old in 32 days is more mature than the one that you just let in last week, so therefore I should also get my child in as well. And I don't know. To me, if we're going to do if we're making the policy, and one of the reasons is to make these decisions in a more uniform and easier way, I would tend to think you just want it black and white. Pick a date, and that's the date. Because otherwise, you're going to let yourself open for having these discussions each year, because when there's a little crack in the door, somebody's going to try to get through it.
Ms. Simon?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Murphy about exceptions, and I think that I would rather see us focus on making sure that kindergartners who have academic diversity their needs are met. I just in the last month heard from someone who was concerned about her child who was, always done first in class, and maybe was concerned her child was getting bored. I think that's what we want to address, is our kindergarten providing the curriculum and the instruction that all of the kids at all of their different developmental stages at that age are at, and have a definitive cutoff point. So for this policy, I do support having a definitive cutoff point. I also agree with Mrs. Monaco that there are certainly private schools that would be equivalent to public schools, and I don't know exactly how to word it, because there's some private schools that I don't think maybe would be up to snuff for what we would consider a public educational equivalent. So if you can find a way to word it, where it says something may be considered for an exemption, so then we can rule out schools where, kids who come from a private school who we feel are maybe not getting the same curricular preparation, that kind of thing.
And I would just like to echo that I agree with Mr. Murphy and Ms. Simon too, that you need a date, and we need to be clear and consistent, kind of like the food policies. When I looked at it, there's no food. There's just no food. September 1st or August 31st, and that's it, because I do think we'll open ourselves to
Which is
the
it?
2nd or 3rd.
September 1st or
Honestly,
August
I
31st?
It's
we
August 31st
start
in
school
this thing.
after Labor Day, so pick a day right before Labor Day, generally, I guess. And then down for the second area for transferring in after first grade, I sat in a meeting where we had a private school student that we were doing the IEP for, and their math curriculum just totally didn't line up. I mean, I don't know, their math and our envisions were nowhere in sync. So, and this was a Massachusetts private school. So again, I'm not sure. I can see the public schools, all public schools take the MCAS, so there is sort of some alignment maybe, but maybe private schools within Massachusetts, because how are you going to evaluate a Texas or Wyoming private school So again, and I just asked if there are any changes made that we see them ahead of time before the 1st, so we can.
Right, so again, I just want to stress that this isn't an exact science. So
Right.
typically what I would tell parents is we don't even know their student as a learner yet. So if they do come to us from Montana, we try to get to know them for a couple months. Our teachers are fantastic, and I do think they make adjustments in their curricula. And if the child is either struggling in a grade that they shouldn't have been placed in or far too advanced for we'll make the change. So I'm saying it's not a decision that you're sort of locked, you're sort of locked into forever. I just think that we have to, for our initial enrollment, make a decision. And I think we need to have some age cutoffs just because of the move-in, the students who we have coming into our community from different places. And I just think it eliminates some of that. I will incorporate, I agree with having some flexibility for schools. So again, Mrs. Monaco, I'll incorporate some language that allows sort of the public, a public-private or equivalent or something like that. I can create some language there. And then, and I do think the point, this also creates, again, quite a burden on the staff because they're trying to evaluate, assess a lot of kids individually. So I just think, and not knowing the student again, and please, I'm not saying we're right or wrong. I tell the parents that first, also coming out of the gate, this is an inexact science, and we're trying to assess your kid the spring when they're 4 years old, and or during the summer when they're 4, and kids change all the time. So, and so I do think we just need a date. So. The February is fine. I think I'll talk about the implementation of that. We obviously have our existing policy and we have survived so far. So one of the things you should probably consider is implementation date if we get the language right, when you want this policy to take place. So again, if you think it's too soon for families for this fall, then we can talk about it. But I think at some point we need to just make sure that we're communicating to everyone what the date is and how we're doing it moving forward. There is a state reg, so I think the state regulations, they're not as firm as sort of they allow local committees to be, but they do have a date that they encourage as well. So it's right around September 1st, so August 31st, September 1st, so is what they're saying. And so. So that's where we are. So again, thank you for the guidance. I will get some revisions back to the committee, and it'll be on the agenda, Sharon, for the first meeting in February. And I'll certainly.
We'll vote on that. All those in favor? Opposed, abstain, 5-0-0.
And then I think there's a Ways and Means meeting, but I will run over to the kindergarten or back and forth and just say that we're considering making some changes. And again, if anyone's impacted, they can certainly contact us, but it's usually a very small number of families.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, next up on the agenda, we have the new school building direction.
It's late, so again, what we should probably do is put this earlier on the agenda to have a conversation, but really what I wanted to highlight to start the conversation or to try to control it is there was a handout at your desk with enrollments numbers.
There is?
Sharon, there's not. Oh. So it's coming right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Eiler can get one, that'd be great, thanks. And Sharon, Diane, can you reach down, I'm sure? Thank you.
Wow.
So, just looking at two charts, I want to thank Sharon for putting it together. Just we took a snapshot August 15th, and then we took a snapshot January 1st. And just, again, a few key things that you guys will see is that's going to impact where we are. And again, this is with my belief that if enrollment pressure is going to be the driving force for building where we're going to be seeing that enrollment pressure, but just between August and January, we've seen an increase of 36 students. So, Mr. Hart, one of the challenges is we're sort of, when we're modeling our staffing, enrollment's a big part of that staffing, and if we're starting to see growth throughout the year, or growth sort of late in the summer, you know, that's where we'll see some variability. So that's, you know, the impact. Now, it's not all 36 kids in one grade. It's not, you know, they're typically spread out. We can typically absorb them. But you can see that we have larger grades sort of at the elementaries coming through. If we continue to have the 300s come in, then we'll see that carry through. There was a drop-off, obviously, between 8 and 9, because we probably have between 40 and 50 kids choose either a private school or Shawsheen. So that's sort of a jump. But if you look at the size of the 8th grade class, again, if we're going to be carrying 300 kids into 8th grade, then you're going to start seeing larger. The high school will probably bump up, you know, to 1,000 or a little bit over 1,000, which, again, I'm not worried about necessarily sections at the high school per se. But we're going to see classroom space pressure at the elementary school. We're sort of maxed out at 16 classrooms a grade. And I'm talking about across the 4 elementary schools. So we really don't have a whole bunch of other room. And Bob, I'm just kind of checking my math, but I think that's, if I go through that, because what we're 4 at Memorial, 4 at Fox Hill, 3, and then 5, right? So that'd be 16. So, so we're sort of locked in there. So that's going to drive our space needs, and Bob did get an answer to your question. We can't have an accelerated repair and a core program in the same year. We have to pick. So we can't submit the high school heating and cooling system and submit for a new elementary school. The deadline for the...
Sorry, not to correct you.
Please.
We can submit more than one project, but we have to pick one as a priority. So we can't have 2 priorities. We can't have one core priority and then an accelerated repair priority. It's either or is our #1 priority, and then they all get consequential going down.
And, sorry, I maybe took the next step, and I'm not sure why submitting 2 would make sense then, but I'm saying that we can get extra credit, but they won't look at it. So I think we probably need to, the deadline for the deadline for the accelerated repair is
February 15th.
So again, I guess so we probably have a couple decisions to make.
Right.
We can change from the high school renovation, which is due in April, to a renovation in February, or we can, once more into the breach, try the high school again, or we can submit a elementary proposal for that I think we can justify enrollment pressure. We do have modular classrooms that are in use at Fox Hill. That's also another factor. Even if we were to submit an elementary school by April and keeping our configuration the same, which means keeping 4 elementary schools, which may make sense. Pine Glen is going to need some renovation. And even if we get a Fox Hill, the structured part of the MSBA, you've all sort of lived through that through the other elementary schools. It's about a 6-year process from going in. So we're talking class, again, if 2020, we're probably talking 2026. So it's none of this is immediate, except the work to prepare the proposals. So
What would be the number on the repair at the high school if we scale it back to just that? How much? that be?
I mean, I can answer it, but it would be a.
Guesstimate.
Depends on how we scale it back to. If it was just HVAC, if we count for inflation, about 12.2, plus there's a couple contingencies and hazmats and so forth, so I'm guessing right around the 15 million mark. That's just for HVAC.
And what was the budget for the entire project that we've been submitting for the past 5 or 6 years? Obviously, it's gone up over time, but was that $30 or $40 million project?
Around 54 million, and then went up to about 75 in the last conversation with the town.
So I'm just kind of thinking aloud with the numbers. If it was a $70 million project and it got approved, and we got the reimbursement that we typically get, the town would be paying about half of that, and we'd get about half of it from the state. So I'm just thinking, fitting this into the capital plan and whatnot, that would have been a $35 million commitment from the town and $35 million from the state. If we have to fund this repair at the high school just on our own, and it's $12 to $14 million to do that, it's still less money than the town would have been on the hook for to do the large, granted, we're not gonna get the larger project, but strictly from a financial standpoint, that should be able to fit into what the town had kind of planned for us to spend in the capital outlay.
Yeah, it's all in there.
I guess my point is, if we go for the emergency repair and pay it on our own, shift our focus with the MSBA to the elementary solution, and we just do the repair part of this that needs to be done down here, strictly from a financial outlay, from the town standpoint, they'd be paying less money than they would have had we had our whole project approved, as we've been trying to do for the last few years.
Do you want to add?
No, I just wanted to say that even for the accelerated repair, depending on the project and the money available, there's potentially somewhere between 15 and 35% reimbursement available for that project, if the state did pick it up as well, too.
If they did.
If they did.
But, I mean, if we've got to choose one or the other to go forward with.
No, right, and please, I'm way out of my area of expertise quickly here. So I also think if the total value of the project exceeds some sort of percentage of the overall evaluation of the buildings.
25%, I think.
It's 25%?
It used to be, I don't know if it's still.
So I don't even know what the high school's evaluated at, but how
that
would you
was in the
evaluate a high school?
report.
I think it's priceless, mind you, but.
Oh, it is indeed.
I don't know, but I'm just saying, then there might be some code stuff that we have to come up, so is that?
It's handicap access, certainly, and.
Building codes too.
So,
Building codes too.
Yeah, in the master plan, it amounts to, it says the trigger's 33%, and it has an assessment of about 49 million for the high school. So it looks right around like 15.5 million would be that 33% trigger. And that's 33% of the assessed value of the high school as it currently sits, or 33% of the square footage of the high school, if that falls under repair.
Okay.
So we are very close to a trigger, especially with contingencies and hazmats and so forth.
But we'd have that same issue if we went with the full project anyway, right?
But the full project accounts for that.
Oh, that was part of that, okay.
Mrs. Monco?
I'm looking at it and trying to simplify it in my head, and while I believe we need to address an elementary school, I don't think it is possible to do it for April. I think we need more time to get that one put together, because when you do that, you really need to know what you want. And my suggestion would be to, in some form, go for the high school in April and plan to go for the elementary next April. But that's just my simplifying it to, in my own head.
Ms. Simon?
I wonder, Ms. Bob, if there was a pause, and if you were going to say that for the HVAC only, it's about a 15 million with the contingencies and such. Is there another layer, another level? Because I know, as we've talked about this, in order to do the HVAC, we have to redo the ceilings, and we have to da-da-da-da. So what would the next level be, and how much would that cost? Do we have numbers for, because my memory is that there were 3 parts to the proposal we had out for the Burlington High School. One was the HVAC, one is the science labs, and the other is all the pieces that go along with tearing out the ceilings, and updating the air quality, and updating the sprinkler systems, and making it ADA accessible. So do you have other numbers for other configurations of that project, as a repair, for example, or maybe not? Okay.
So again, yes, I do have the numbers. The numbers that I have are estimates that were provided us in the master plan.
Okay.
That was prepared in 2017. So
Mhm.
obviously, those could fluctuate based on actual bids.
Yeah.
But the numbers given, again, if we were to do the whole entire project, we were looking at about $75 million.
Mhm.
The number I gave you about is $11.3 million.
Mhm.
That was in 2017 with inflation 12.2. That's just for the HVAC.
What does that, excuse me, what does that mean, just for the, tell us what that means.
So that means if we did not have to repair the ceiling and do any duct work, and we didn't have to rip up any floors, and we didn't have to pour any concrete, and we didn't have to do any new electrical or add in new panels or new fuses and so forth, rip a boiler out, put a boiler in, change a vent over on the wall, that's HVAC. So if we look at electrical alone, there's another $6.8 million before inflation, just in electrical, right? And that would be to, new panels on the walls, new fuse boxes, some new lighting, things like that. But that doesn't replace every single light, every single wire in the building. It upgrades the necessities, and again, that was the estimate of it. And then plumbing, about $3.5 million. And then there's some interior work for $5 million. So again, based off estimates, I can pull a percentage off all of those. So again, we wouldn't need 50% of the electrical just to do the HVAC, probably a smaller number, 20%. So maybe another $1 million. And again, the numbers that were the estimates didn't include pulling down every single ceiling. It's pulling all drawings, looking at what's down in the boiler and so forth. So that contingency that's in here alone, it's $15 million. So that's a big number too, just because we don't know what's behind those walls. So if you pull the percentage off of that, and you want to say 20% of it, give or take, that's $3 million. So I don't know that you can really just say, just replace a boiler, that's off the table. But replace the boiler in a 365,000 square foot building, with 200 plus rooms. We're gonna get into ceiling expenses, flooring expenses, electrical expenses. And I do believe that we would exceed that cap of that 33%.
So if we were to put, and I somewhat agree with Mrs. Monaco that April is a very tight deadline for coming up with what we want to do for the elementary crowding. But I also feel like February 15th is tight for the repair. But when we say HVAC only, I don't know how we've been saying all along, we can't just replace the boilers.
That's right.
So I feel like we have to put out a proposal, and I'd like to do, my first thought, and I certainly can be talked out of this and I don't feel definitive, but that we should put in a accelerated repair for the February 15th deadline, and it should include the HVAC and the associated things, because the HVAC system means tearing up the building. And if we're gonna tear down the ceilings, we need to replace the ventilation, and if we, and we should put all that in, and if that means it triggers ADA improvements, well, good. Let's include the ADA improvements, and I know then it's gonna be more than 12 million or 15 million, but we do have, that's where I feel like we need to go and say, this is what we need, and as, I mean, I like the way, I mean, then if it doesn't get supported by the state, I mean, of whatever that amount is, we still have to, it's very frustrating.
Yes.
Because there's so many moving parts. But I feel like we can't just say, well, we're gonna put in a repair for the HVAC system, and it's gonna be 15 million, but then we're not gonna have sprinkler system in the high school. And we're not gonna have air quality up to code. And we're not gonna have an ADA accessible building,
Yes, so Mrs. Simon, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
through the chair, we've had this conversation over the last 7 years with
Right.
MSBA. What Jack McCarthy, who's the head of it, basically said is, what you're asking for is more than an accelerated repair. So that's what really pushed us into the core program change. He did say we're sort of in a hybrid place where we have a clear accelerated repair need, but because that accelerated repair need is going to trigger other things, we also have a clear curricular need in terms of our science labs
Right.
that he was saying it's really not an appropriate accelerated repair. So even though we're talking about an accelerated repair and paring it down, I'm not sure we could, because it would trigger so many other things, we were encouraged not to include it in an accelerated repair 7 years ago when we tried this for the first time. Again, just for some other context, Arlington is building a new high school that's around this size. So if you're thinking they're building a high school for about 2,000, they're a larger high school than we are. And I think it was in the paper just because I'm familiar, the bids were initially over $300 million. So the prices aren't going down, and I think high schools of this size are expensive. And I remember when we first started this process, the $200 million mark was sort of the sacred, we'll never cross that, and that was the Newton North, and now we're sort of pushing past that now as well. So as the projects get more expensive, then the state can just afford to support fewer of them. So I think that's part of the challenge that the state has as well, and they have a lot of needed larger projects that are in process that are happening. So
to qualify for an accelerated repair under their definition, we'd probably have to back out the science labs.
Yes.
Definitely.
But we can do the rest of it.
No.
Just.
Again, I think the guidance we got from MSBA was we couldn't. I think I would go back to them and try to have that conversation again, just because of the age of this building, it would trigger so many other things that they felt we needed more of a core renovation. So I think that was the advice that we got. The accelerated repair would be if we didn't maintain our buildings and we had a roof failure. And we needed to put in for the $3 million for a roof. That is typically what they use the accelerated repair for, would be some sort of catastrophic failure that communities, would have access to. And that's where we were sort of stuck in between an accelerated repair and a core program. I think if our core program gets accepted, it's the right thing to do. That's the advice we've gotten through our master plan. And if I could predict next December and saying if we got it, it'd be worthwhile. Just with that 6-year window, my sort of thinking is we have 3 schools that are in need of renovation: Pine Glen, Fox Hill, and the high school. And it's not a surprise to anyone. They all were sort of built in the 60s and I think have been well taken care of and are serving the community well. And so we just need to fit it in. I think the long-term debt conversations have been positive. The town's not without other building needs, so I think we have to cooperate and sort of fit it in with everyone else and figure it out. But I think I have no problem moving forward with our high school renovation again. We will put more effort in. We can certainly set up meetings with the MSBA to see if there's anything we can do to enhance our project. The feedback we've gotten the last 2 years is they feel like our proposal matches our need very well. I asked if there's anything we can do to improve it. They've said no. But you get no credit for trying. So every year is a new year, so it doesn't matter if we've applied 10 times. It's just a new year, new consideration.
I'm sorry, just one more. Are you Chris has given the opinion that we don't have enough time between now and April to thoroughly vet possible elementary solutions and put something forward. We've talked about this obviously informally off and on over the years. We have some master plan input, both from the one previous and the most recent one. So I think we're all aware of what the various options might be. Would you prefer to move that to the front burner and have those discussions between now and April and go that route to get that 6-year clock ticking? Or do we need more time to vet the options and to have those discussions?
I feel like if we keep the current configuration we have, which I'm saying is if we keep 4 elementary schools, so we know we're going to have Pine Glen, Fox Hill, Francis Wyman, and Memorial. And so our sort of buses are going to be the same. And again, acknowledging that Pine Glen's going to need some work. Do I think we can put together an elementary proposal? I think we can. I think Memorial is a model school design. I think if you all sort of buy into that concept about using a model, it's where our property is. It would be about adequately sizing the school, and you know my history with that, so you'd probably have to accompany me to the MSBA. We have to use their enrollment projections. My only reason for saying that is I just think if they are prioritizing enrollment pressure, we will not experience enrollment pressure according to their perspective at the high school, because technically what they could say is you could move the superintendent, you can move the central office out and have these classrooms for classrooms. They wouldn't consider that we have to put the central office somewhere else. They would say you could move out BCAT, you could move out the preschool. So from their sort of context, we're not experiencing enrollment pressure like Arlington, like Stoneham, like some of the other schools that were selected. So I believe in terms of their going down their checklist, enrollment pressure is a high priority, and that's why I believe we can make more of a case for enrollment pressure at the elementary level. But again, it doesn't mean the need here goes away. I think the need here is significant, and I think honestly a $75 million, $80 million investment for another 30 or 40 years, I know that's a lot of money, but I'm saying compared to 300 million, it would be something that is, I think, smart. So again, people who know buildings, again, you've invested in a master plan, said the high school should be sort of next on the list, followed by sort of Fox Hill, Pine Glen. But I don't know, there's some saying that I'll mess up, fool me once or fool me twice, right? So it's late, but you know, I don't know.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is obviously a complex topic, but with respect to the first issue we were talking about, the accelerated repair for $15 million, I think it's a waste of time, myself. And what Eric just said at the very end of his comments was we need to focus on different things. One of them is the high school. That was a suggestion of the master plan committee. It's going to cost $75 million. In my view, the state's never going to pay for it.
I agree.
They're never going to pay for it. But we have to go forward with it. It's 6 years now. With science labs, it should have been fixed 16 years ago. Let's get moving and get the high school up to speed and into the 21st century. I think we ought to go forward as soon as possible, and I'm not saying we can do it by, the spring of this year, but we've got to get a proposal together and get it into the town's bond schedule of $75 million to fix the high school. Either that, or we're going to be asking for $300 million when we have to blow this building up someday. I remember when Woburn High School was built 15 years ago, Eric, 10, 15 years ago, the town was up in arms because it went from 50 million to 70 million, and they had to come up with another 20 million. And then we were talking about Newton North, I think it was. They were up in arms over that one. It was 150 million. And now Arlington, Bill Ricker's doing 175 million, I think, and Arlington's up to 300 million. The numbers are staggering. They're absolutely staggering. No one in this town is, I don't think, going to want to spend 300 million or half of that on a new high school if we can fix it for 75 and get 30 more years out. I think that we need to move forward as soon as possible. Get new numbers. The 75 million might be out of date, I don't know. Let's move forward, have conversations with the selectmen and with town meeting members about the need for a $75 million upgrade. We've been rejected now 6 times in a row by the state. It doesn't fit their definition of an accelerated repair. We don't have enrollment pressure. We're never gonna get it approved, in my opinion. I mean, I've met with them as well as you, Eric, and they're nice folks, but unless they change the language in the statute, we're not gonna get approved. We take good care of our buildings and we get punished for it, unfortunately. So my thought was, and my feeling is that we should try to get a project going as soon as possible for local approval, update the numbers on the high school, and ask the town to support it. If it's 75 million and we have to go out and bond it over 20 years, it's half of 7.5 million a year, right? So it's $3-4 million a year to fix the high school. I don't know the numbers, Nicole, you can crank them a lot better than I can. But if we can bond it over 20 years, it's not that much money for the high school in terms of comparing it to a new building. And I agree with Mrs. Monaco. I don't see how we're going to come up with a plan for the elementary school by April 15th. We still have to have conversations about, do we need 4 elementary schools? I know Eric wants 4. I think there's a lot of people at the town meeting level that might say, why don't you do 3? Then you don't need all the administrators and you don't need as many, you don't have the overhead. You can cut back on the overhead and that will be helpful. But I think we need to have those conversations. Do we want a larger elementary school at the Fox Hill site? And then we only have to fix 1 school, not 2. So there's a lot of people, I think, that are gonna ask those questions. And I think we need to spend a little more than a couple of weeks and then try to ram in a proposal. I'm not even sure we could get updated numbers between now and April 15th. I think we would probably need that, Bob, wouldn't we, to submit? I mean, those 2 years old, those figures that you quoted, right?
Yeah, I mean, but they're predicted some escalation in there. I think that's what we would need really just to kind of submit, because we're not actually putting in a full proposal. It's more on the town's bond side or debt schedule side that the town would have to approve off, that they would be able to fund it if we were approved.
The other question, Eric, is you talked about enrollment pressure, and a lot of people aren't going to believe at the state level that we have enrollment pressure at the elementary schools compared to other communities. I think we do. Every time I turn around, there's a new 4-bedroom house going on a small lot that used to be a ranch with 2 retired people in it. And so I know they're going up. These numbers confirm it, but we also have to think about how these numbers compare to what the predictions were when we did the master plan. Are these numbers way over that prediction? I don't know if you've even had a chance to look at it, or are they consistent with it? And do you think that we satisfy that enrollment pressure criteria? If we don't, then I guess we're looking at the age of the building and the fact that it needs to be replaced because it's in bad condition.
Yeah, and there are modulars in place, so I guess that was all I was saying, is we could sort of say we're sort of, we've tried to address sort of the need for additional classroom space. Haven't heard the MSBA say you have to hit a threshold of 25 kids in a class before they consider enrollment pressure. I do think they allow the local community to make that distinction. And again, this committee has always been pretty clear about class size being a priority. You don't want to have specialists without classrooms. So again, I think we can make the case programmatically. But I do think I have been part of those conversations as well about 3 elementary schools. And again, I have some feelings about that. And you know, we would probably need an elementary school of close to 800 or 900, which is, there's some challenges to that too. It's not just about numbers of kids that can fit in a building. So that's a lot of kids, and it would be a setting that people here aren't very familiar with. So just, and maybe less some overhead, but you would need some assistant principals to manage 1,000.
I'm not saying I support it.
No, I know. All I'm saying is I think sometimes operationally, they're not always as cost effective as people would imagine, depending on the program that you run. So,
The other thing, Eric, is that if we do put a new school over at Fox Hill, the parents of the children at Pine Glen are gonna want a new school. And so we're gonna have to build that into our capital plan at some point. I mean, it is an old building, well-maintained like most of our, all of our buildings are.
It's actually older than Fox
It's
Hill.
older than
Yeah, it's
Fox
older.
Hill.
I know it. So you can't just talk about the Fox Hill in isolation. It's really a two-school conversation.
It is.
Unless we do one big one, and that's why we have to have those conversations.
It's too big.
we do, which would take, again, more time. So I guess what I'm sort of getting here is we will sort of update some of the numbers that we're seeing in a master plan. Bob and I will try to set up a conversation. Again, Jack McCarthy from MSBA has been very supportive and answers questions. I'll, again, ask him the distinction, again, between an accelerated repair and a core program, but I believe his advice is gonna stay the same, is you are far beyond an accelerated repair. And then we can, we can ask about enhancing our proposal, and we can try to put it in again. But, at some point, they said, every year they go through it. There were 85 submissions, we funded 14, and we were one of the group that we got moved forward to the second step, so I think we've made progress, but again, progress isn't, there's no memory from year to year. So I think people have identified the need, I just think they've run out of money. So, and so we can try that again, and then continue to have conversations about the elementary school, and concurrent to that, Mr. Nelson, we can meet, again, Nicole has been meeting, but we can continue to meet with the capital planning team and try to get more money designated over time for a potential of supporting the high school renovation locally. So.
Ms. Simon?
So, I feel, again, an urgency about this, and some of it are the deadlines, and some of it is, I don't know, do we have a plan if the boilers die at the high school? Are we gonna cancel school?
No, we would bring in portable boilers. So I just lived through that I witnessed a lot of that on the sort of Merrimack Valley.
Yeah,
So
right.
we
So-
would have to lease boilers
Right.
monthly.
Okay, and so I agree with Mr. Nelson. I think that we need to, if we couldn't get an elementary project ready for April, we could resubmit for the high school. But I think that we need to not just wait on that. That regardless of which proposals we put out, I think we need to start having a conversation about a project for local approval. The state, I don't think, is gonna fund it. I don't think they're gonna have enough money to get to us on the list. I know it's not, it won't be popular, it's a lot of money, but I think that it's pretty clear that we need to do it, and if we don't do that, we'll be paying for it by renting boilers or whatever. And then there are all those issues around our science labs being so out of date, and the air quality, and all of those other issues. I also would like to suggest that we not just say we have to keep talking about it, but that we set up maybe additional school committee meetings that would be working. It's late to have more conversation tonight, doesn't feel terribly productive. Not saying other people shouldn't say more, but I'd like to suggest that we agree to have additional school committee meetings that are working meetings where this is the agenda, so we can get into a discussion. And I think if we did that, we might be able to get an elementary proposal ready for an April deadline. We might be able to make decisions about if we want to go with 4 elementary schools or a 5th grade academy or whatever the various, or a 900-student elementary school, which I am not in favor of. So I'd like to suggest that we continue this conversation, but not expect to fit it into our agendas, and to not wait. And I'd like to propose that we meet next Tuesday night, if people are available, to have one agenda. I don't know how you do it legally. Call it a working meeting. We would invite the public to, hear our perspectives, and if, at some point, we would invite the public to give us their input too, because this is a process where I think it's important to get input from the public. But I think we need more time to have this conversation, and so that's my suggestion going forward.
All right, so there's been a lot of discussion. First, I'd like to talk about the high school. We have different opinions, but it sounds like moving forward with the town for funding on the high school, for repairs. My question is, does the board wish to move through with the complete renovation, HVAC, science labs, bringing the building up to code? Or do we want to focus on what we were just saying about the accelerated repair, just HVAC?
Are you asking if we want to propose that to the town?
We need to come to some sort of consensus on how to move forward with the high school at this point. And I've heard two people in favor of HVAC.
What I've heard is, I've heard a couple people say the accelerated repair doesn't make sense. And what I'm saying is, I'm not sure it even makes sense from the state perspective in terms of having this project qualify for an accelerated repair. So if that's the case, then the February deadline seems to not be something that we're going to submit for. The April, just given all the conversations that we would need to have with elementary, I think that we can update the high school proposal. Again, we can try to do some wordsmithing, word crafting. We can set up a meeting with Matt or Jack from the MSBA. Hopefully get them out to visit again. Again, they've been here, they've been engaged in the conversation, so they're well aware of our project. And we can certainly meet the April deadline, and that doesn't mean that we wouldn't schedule some additional working meetings to talk about what's next. Again, concurrent to that is we need to continue to meet with the capital team and long-term financial planning with the town to talk about some options that if we continue not to get state funding for the high school, that this committee would like us to propose, promote, request that additional funding be put onto the debt schedule to account for the high school renovation project locally. So again, I think that's all going to take some time. So Ms. Russo, that's sort of what I'm hearing, and if that's, just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Just one question. I assume then that next April would be the filing for the elementary, a year from it?
Yes.
Is April 15th the annual?
Yes.
So if we go to the timeline that Eric just suggested, I think obviously that takes the immediacy out of the discussions about the elementary solution, but it does give us a target date by which we have to have those discussions and come to some sort of a consensus, and that's by next April.
Right.
I think it's something we should be putting on the front burner because time tends to go by, and I just don't want to be looking up next November and say, oh geez, we haven't talked about this yet. You know, perhaps don't have to meet next Tuesday now, but I do think it's got to be a front burner discussion, or to start the discussion.
I agree. It sounds like Eric is now planning to do two things. One is to have conversations with the state and go forward with putting the high school in again. And at the same time, have conversations with the town, because clearly we're not getting anywhere with the state and we need to do the work. Steve's right. If they're not gonna pay for it, we gotta do it anyway. And then as a secondary goal, then be prepared next April to go to SBA with an elementary project.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we go to the town, my question is, are we looking for the whole shabam here?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're all in agreement. So
Yeah.
we need to start having that conversation for more of a $75 million capital budget earmark,
80.
put in there.
Yeah.
And then that will already be in the process, so when we get our rejection letter, but maybe because we put this in the process, it'll come out. I doubt it, because some high schools, it's raining inside.
Yeah.
And we have kept
That's
our
right.
schools very, very well maintained. And it's very hard for them to compare our school to other schools who have so much more structural issues. So I feel comfortable and secure in moving forward with the April deadline for the high school, as long as we are also having that conversation, capital budget, about putting a placeholder, what do they call it, into the debt schedule. And whether it bonds 20 years, 10 years, but at least getting those numbers out there so we are aware. Now, with regard to elementary school, Martha's right, we keep talking about, we need to start moving forward with it. My question to the board, would we prefer to start with a small working group with Dr. Conti administrators, a principal or two, and put out some ideas, the different options, and then as a whole board, we start having that conversation, and then we have to bring it through the public, because my fear is making a decision based on money and not what is appropriate and educationally prudent to do. So I want to make sure we are in agreement how best to start that conversation so it remains child and education centered.
Right, so again, Ms. Monaco, my suggestion is before we meet, I just want to get you all a list of questions that we need to provide information for, because
Right.
otherwise we'll be
Mhm.
just sort of circling.
Right.
So again, obviously enrollment will be some, I mean, I'll put together a list of questions. You can add to those questions, and that will, we can do some work. So when we do meet, we can have some information to share, and then we can have a conversation around that, around that information.
All I wanted to say is that I don't think we can make those decisions. I think we have to wait for Eric to tell us what he wants to do. He wants to meet and do this, he wants this group, you know, it's late at night, let him think about it and come back with how he wants to approach it.
Okay, can we have that? What time frame do you, because again, I don't want this to, we have budget season coming.
Yeah.
So, and then the summer, and then we're back to school. So what is a
Probably
time frame?
February, March will be, let's get through, we have a town meeting in January, we have sort of the budget, initial budget crunch, and some other things that I think are as important, and I want to have actually a conversation with town and the financial team, and sort of have some conversations first, and I want to put together some information, so we're sort of, again, there's going to be lots of opinions, I just want
Right,
to make sure we have
right.
one set of facts, so
Right.
that's a lesson learned.
Just one other comment, I know it's late. We certainly can't ask town meeting for approval of a bond for $75 million for the high school this May. I mean,
Right.
that's crazy. I think our goal should be to try to line up our ducks and get them ready for next May.
Agreed.
And ask town meeting, and that'll give us plenty of time to explain to everyone in the town why we need it, why the state's rejected it, what we're gonna do with the money. Maybe we can get some plans and show them what we're going to do. To say we gotta replace ductwork, I mean, I understand it, because I've been told it. We've gone through it with Craig Robinson over the years. We know that some of the ductwork in this building dead ends up against bricks. It doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't provide ventilation. Some of the rooms on the second floor don't even have windows. A lot of people in town never been on the second floor in those rooms with no windows, with no ventilation, and they don't understand why it costs so much money. So I think we need time to educate people. And I think if we shoot for next May, tell the town, look, somehow you're gonna have to factor in a request for $75 million bond approval. I think they're 20-year bonds, aren't they, Eric?
20 or 30, I think it all depends.
Yeah.
Some come off, some come on, I
Yeah.
think they,
I think they're 20.
so, I don't know.
But that's what I would suggest, that we really target next May to get this high school done, get the project going.
Keeping in mind, there might be some feedback from the town might lead to discussions about debt exclusion, override type of
Yeah.
things too. So it's
Yeah.
not-
Like to avoid that, though.
it's not necessarily just gonna be a flat bond.
No, you're right. They might want us to do something else, and we might have to push back a little bit, but we'll see.
I support what you laid out, Mrs. Rousseau, and, you know, having you, Dr. Conti, come back to us with a proposal of how to approach it. But I have to say that I've been on the school committee for 4 years, and we've been talking about for 4 years how there's enrollment pressure coming at the elementary level, and we've never had the conversation. So I feel like everyone else I mean, I don't feel like I'm the only one who thinks we need to have that conversation. But I feel like, you know, February, March, you know, if it doesn't fit into our agendas, I think we need to have additional meeting time. Or if it's going to go to a smaller committee, that's fine, but I think we need to do it now. I've been concerned about this for a couple of years. And this year, where we didn't get, I guess I was crossing my fingers that we'd get the BHS approved, project approved, and that just doesn't seem realistic. I think it makes sense, given the timing, that it's already this late, that we should go ahead with the BHS full program request in April, but I don't have a lot of hope for it. And so I do feel like we should go ahead with the other, going to the town about it for May 2020. We'll know by then if the state's going to help us out. But I just want us to make sure that we do get to these conversations in the next couple of months, so that it's, you know, all of what people just said tonight actually happens. I'm really concerned about it.
So through the chair, I'll include a schedule as well.
Great.
So I think we can do
Thank
almost
you.
like a budget calendar. We can do that for the conversation, so the days will be concrete. And we can put together some working sessions for that.
Thank you.
We got anything else?
Teacher sabbatical leave.
It's almost like an out-of-state, so Madam Chair, may I move on?
Yes.
Just to wrap up, is we have a first request that I've experienced for sabbatical leave. It's a high school Spanish teacher. Daniela D'Souza has submitted a well-thought-out proposal. She's going to be living and traveling in Spain and attending different secondary schools in Spain as her sabbatical year. The contract allows for her to do that. She's been employed in the district over 7 years. It does say that upon sort of my support, but it did mention, Sharon, in there that school committee, is it school committee approval, or they have to be made aware of it, or approval? So again, I support it. Mark Sullivan supports it. We're seeking your support for our high school Spanish teacher's sabbatical year next year. She would owe then the district 2 years of service upon her return.
So moved. Second.
Been moved in second. Any discussion?
I'd just like to know what the financial implications are.
We have to pay a percentage of her salary by contract, so I think that's about 75% of her salary, and then we'd have to make up her sections next year in the budget as well. So, and again, this is not a very frequent request. It's It's really my first. And Diane, I'm not sure that you've experienced many in your time here either. So it's just it is a contractual benefit that she has available.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, passes 5-0-0. Is there anything else under new business? Seeing none, public participation? Seeing none, we do have a need for executive session. To do so for approval of executive minutes, contract negotiations, potential litigation. Holding this in open session would have detrimental effect on position in the public body. The school committee will only return to public session for a purpose of adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Monco? Mr. Nelson? And the chair votes aye. We are in executive session.